Session number 14 on fundamental freedoms, including freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. I hope that today's discussions will build on issues that were raised in previous years at Human Dimension meetings and provide recommendations to address outstanding concerns. Since many of those concerns, I am sure, will be already covered by our introducer today, let me just briefly tell you a couple of things that ODIHR is doing in this area. In order to assist participating states in improving their implementation of relevant commitments, my office, jointly with the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe, will soon be launching the guidelines on the legal personality of religious or belief communities, a product of collaboration of ODIHR's advisory panel of experts on freedom of religion or belief with the Venice Commission. The guidelines aim to provide guidance to participating states in ensuring quick, simple, and non-discriminatory access to legal personality. ODIHR also continues to provide expert assistance to participating states seeking review of the draft legislation on freedom of religion or belief. It is my hope that this working session serves as a forum to identify issues of concern, track the progress achieved, and promote vigorous exchange of ideas and good practices, ultimately serving to enhance the implementation of commitments on freedom of religion or belief. And to get us started on the topic today, I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Ms. Laureline Fontaine, who is a professor of public law at the Institute of European Studies, Université Sorbonne Nouvelle, Paris 3. She is a member of the Academic Council of the Journal Les Cahiers de la Recherche sur les droits fondamentaux. Her academic interest lies primarily with constitutional law, the role of law in the evolution of society, and interdisciplinary analysis of law. And to help us moderate in the session, I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Dimitri Kavak, who is a human rights defender and president of the Open Viewpoint Foundation, which is one of the organizations comprising the Human Rights Defenders Council of Kyrgyzstan. He has worked extensively on freedom of religion or belief issues as a member of the ODIHR advisory panel of experts on freedom of religion or belief. Dimitri?
Dear colleagues, let me use Russian language, but also I fluently speak in English. Дорогие коллеги, я хочу всех призвать быть краткими, пересмотрите свои доклады. К сожалению, из-за того, что, или к счастью, из-за того, что у нас уже свыше 60 докладчиков, поэтому, скорее всего, у каждого будет возможность выступить в пределах 1,5 минуты. Сократите доклад как можно короче, и тогда у каждого будет возможность выступить. Я прошу вновь обратиться к нашим коллегам, которые находятся за моей спиной, для того, чтобы попытаться внести себя в список, и тогда у нас будет возможность выступать. Перед тем, как вы будете выступать, прошу назвать себя. В этом случае, чтобы все остальные знали, кто выступает. Для того, чтобы очередь у нас шла запланирована, мы будем представлять того человека, кто выступает сейчас, и также заранее называть следующего человека, чтобы он мог подготовиться, это позволит всем сэкономить время. К сожалению, из-за того, что я сам модератор, я не смогу выступать по своей собственной стране, и очень надеюсь, что представители из Кыргызстана поднимут вопросы. Также в базе документов по сегодняшней сессии я поместил несколько документов о Кыргызстане, если кому будет интересно. Ну, на этом... Значит, мне сообщают коллеги, что уже список выступающих на сегодня закрыт. Поэтому все, кто смог записаться, вы будете выступать в порядке очереди. Я буду информировать в случае, если время будет подходить к концу, то есть сейчас пока что норма 1,5 минуты. Если кто-то будет больше этого времени выступать, я дам соответствующий сигнал. Прошу на это обращать внимание. Теперь я передаю слово коллегам.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank OSCE for the organization of this meeting. It allows sharing of experiences and good practices, but we must keep in mind that good practices always depend on the goodwill of all the actors, and precisely, problems we talk about are always occurring because of the lack of goodwill from the different actors. everything we can say shall be discussed by those who, for any reasons, don't agree all the consequences of freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. And we must also say that there are different ways to think this freedom. There is one thing sure. Respect due to this freedom is a well-known international standard. The present meeting is to remind it to each person and each state. We also know how difficult and sensitive it is to implement the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief in the best way. As a state guarantee, international rules assert this freedom includes either protection and preservation, either religion and atheism, or even blasphemy. It means, for example, freedom of religion and freedom of thought are both equal. A person can hold a particular religion or no religion at all. A person is protected when he says God is the best thing in the world, as well as when he says God is the worst thing in the world. Maybe some experiences about those issues will be told furthermore by the speakers. For the moment, I'd wish to wonder about the fundamental aim of the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. From the first declarations in the 17th and 18th centuries in UK, United States, and France, it appears as a natural human right that exists before being under the law. As a consequence, legal framework has to ensure it for everyone. For many years, international organizations make some efforts to enhance human rights and encourage states to involve them in their legal framework. When reading international recommendations and statements, a freedom should be guaranteed per se, eventually because of God's wishes. Political philosophy has told us through social contract theories. Understanding these theories, it looks like every individual were a natural right holder before its recognition by state law, so that natural rights or freedom are also obligations for political authorities, for states. But I am not sure they are. It seems to me that the link between a natural human right and the obligation of legal guarantee is not so obvious as it can appear. Certainly, there is a third implied element that links one to the other. What could it be? I'd like to look over this question through this issue. Is law at the service of rights, or rights at the service of law? Today, we usually think law is at the service of rights. But if it is, the inevitable collective dimension of law is unknown. A Latin adage says, where society is, law is, ubi societas ibi jus. It means two things. First, as a link between individuals, law is necessary. Relations between individuals create rules. Second, without law, there is no society and no relations between individuals, which could be translated by rule or perish. Then, thinking of law means thinking of the best way to not perish. It means thinking of which rules can make links between individuals. And that point is significant. Specific rules are not naturally imposed to society. Through law, a society determines how to make good links between individuals and therefore selects appropriate rules. Thereby, recognition by law of a right of freedom, even looked on as a natural one, has a unique purpose: facilitate building and maintaining of a society. Through state and law, society defines the extension of a right or freedom and do not take them as natural as they are supposed to be. Then, extension of a legal right or freedom depends on the type of society required. We must keep in mind that stakes are high. For the last centuries, development of law, and particularly state law, but not only, I think of tribal laws, is thought as to build a non-violent society, a stable and and well-balanced society. Even though it hasn't always succeeded well, we can say it is the fundamental aim of law today. Reading the international standards, we can see it is more a stable and non-violent society which is looked for than a violent one. As my first question was, what is the fundamental aim of freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief, we can see it depends on the answer at this second question: how to make law for a stable and non-violent society. The philosophy of law I was describing seems to imply recognition of all ways of thinking. It was the purpose of John Locke's philosophy, as to facilitate a stable and well-balanced society and to provide security for every individual. Thinking that all individuals can have the same way of thinking creates violence. We can see it everywhere. Then people have to choose between denying a part of population's freedom of thought in the name of another way of thinking, and then create specific violence, and recognize this freedom for all as to encourage a stable and well-balanced society. Protection and preservation of freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief, even as an individual right, must be considered more as a tool than per se. It is used to make a safety society. And it is necessary to precise that stability and security are historically and obviously more provided from state through law and rules than from individuals or religions. It is also necessary to precise that the acceptability of the legal framework of freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and belief must be considered with regard to a fair aim. Someone can say that is a certain way of thinking. It means there are other ways which can be opposed to it, in the name of principles supposed to be highest. Conflicts about the way of thinking are definitely inevitable. Wondering about the best way is an aporia. Therefore, state law is not a perfect solution to conflicts, but actually it seems to be the only one. By state, human beings create a superior authority, which is recognized as a legitimate authority to use binding ways for the respect of rules. If state is also a violent authority, its legitimacy must be linked to three elements: its aim, its methods, its efficiency. Its aim, building and maintaining a stable and safety society because of the possibility for every individual to have its own way of thinking. Its methods, first, being fair with all beliefs which have to be fair too. Second, not promoting a particular thought, conscience, religion, or belief at the expense of the others. Its efficiency. At this point, most of beliefs or religions cannot succeed because their neutrality is impossible. States can involve neutrality, even though it is built on a particular religion. Religion may be a block building, but not the law. As I said earlier, there is an aporia. If a way of thinking or worship seems to prescribe something which is unfair or incite to violence, state can use some of violence to avoid or punish illegal practices. But we must consider it's not a battle of violence nor a battle of thought or religions. According to international standards, using binding ways is not for the preservation of some individuals or some ways of thinking, but for the preservation of all individuals and all ways of fair thinking. Is this acceptable for those who, promoting a religion or promoting authority of state, or both, would like to impose one way of thinking? I'm not sure it is. Can law get over it? If law is made by those for whom a fair law is unacceptable, it seems to be particularly difficult. Law is either a tool for liberty and for violence. In both cases, it is the best one. Most of us declare preference for fair law. At this point, maybe we use the same words. But same words can involve different ideas, different ideologies. So we must work on the ideas and not on the words. Thank you.
Спасибо большое за содержательное выступление. Сейчас мы открываем возможность для выступлений. И у меня есть хорошая новость, что, рассчитав количество участников, будет возможность выступать в пределах до 2 минут. Но, к сожалению, мне придется поступать, с одной стороны, справедливо, может быть, не демократично, и обрывать длинные выступления, либо просить говорить в тему. Итак, открываю список. Значит, первый сейчас выступающий – это Atheist Ireland, and the second will be USA delegation.
Thank you. In July, the United Nations Human Rights Committee told Ireland to stop breaching the human rights of atheists. The Catholic Church runs 90% of our primary schools, state-funded, and can lawfully discriminate against atheist families and teachers. 2 new government bills, one on schools admissions and one on jobs, will actually reinforce that discrimination. Our President, our Prime Minister and judges must swear religious oaths to take office. Can you imagine telling a Christian or a Muslim that they have to swear that there is no God before they took office? Pregnant women have had their pelvises broken without their consent in order to avoid caesarean sections that might have led to a demand for contraception or sterilisation. Women are denied abortion on health grounds, despite the United Nations telling Ireland that majority votes in Parliament or referendums cannot be used to deny human rights. A new law on secular marriage discriminates against atheists openly and creates a state monopoly for private entrepreneurs to sell ceremonies. The government said in Parliament that the reason for discriminating against atheists was to avoid Elvis impersonators solemnising marriages. We're finally planning to remove our new blasphemy law, the one that Pakistan praised us for passing. The United Nations Human Rights Committee has told Ireland very sternly to stop breaching the human rights of atheists and indeed minority faiths. We ask the OSCE to repeat and reinforce that call and to treat Ireland like any other nation state that defies its international human rights obligations. Religious states promote religion. Atheist states promote atheism. We want a secular state that promotes neither, that respects equally the human rights of all of its citizens. We want freedom of conscience, religion and belief. We want equality before the law, and we want freedom from discrimination. Only a secular state can provide that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. USA delegation, followed by Human Rights Without Frontier.
As we in the United States continue to improve our own practices, my delegation wishes to thank the OSCE's 3 tolerance representatives and ODIHR for their efforts to defend the freedom of religion or belief throughout the OSCE. I refer you to our fuller comments in our written statement, but would like to highlight a few issues here. One reason this fundamental freedom is so important is that evidence shows that countries that restrict it are inherently less stable and more vulnerable to violent extremism. And even in places where some governments justify restrictions on religious freedom in the name of combating extremism, evidence shows, in fact, that those efforts are counterproductive. We are concerned about increasing restrictions on peaceful religious practice, including Islam, in Central Asia. The United States has designated Uzbekistan a country of particular concern for religious freedom violations since 2006, and designated Turkmenistan for the first time in 2014, this summer. Authorities in both countries continue to imprison people for their religious beliefs, raids, and restrictions on religious literature. In Tajikistan, laws prohibit anyone under 18 from participating in public religious activities, and women are effectively barred from praying in mosques. Laws in Kazakhstan also penalize some religious activities. We are very concerned by the use of restrictive laws on religion and extremism to target members of some religions. In Russia, authorities have imprisoned, raided the homes, and confiscated religious materials of some Jehovah's Witnesses, Muslims, and others. In Russia-occupied Crimea, mounting pressure on the Muslim Tatar community comes through attacks on mosques and raids on madrasas. We also note pressure against members of other religious communities in Crimea. Mr. Moderator, laws that require the registration of religious groups often have the effect of restricting basic rights. In Hungary, the parliament has extraordinarily extraordinary and basically unchecked power to decide what is and what is not a church. The government of Turkey has yet to recognize officially Alevi houses of worship and lift restrictions on the Greek Orthodox Ecumenical Patriarchate. Yesterday, we highlighted our concerns about ongoing and growing anti-Semitism throughout the OSCE region, particularly in Western Europe. We also remain concerned about efforts to ban religious practices such as ritual slaughter and circumcision. In closing, we urge all participating states to respond promptly to hate crimes, participate in the November Berlin Conference, and fully implement their OSCE commitments regarding freedom of religion or belief. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now the floor for Human Rights Without Frontiers, and followed by Forum 18.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As time is limited, I will start with the recommendations. Human Rights Without Frontiers recommends to the government of Turkmenistan to release objectors to military service and to adopt a legislation creating an alternative civilian service, to grant all religious communities the right of association, assembly, and worship, to allow believers of any religion to share their beliefs individually or collectively, to lift censorship on the publication, production, and import of religious literature, to decriminalize the religious activities of unregistered religious groups and their members. In Turkmenistan, a number of young Jehovah's Witnesses are in prison for conscientious objection to military service. They have no opportunity to perform alternative civilian service, as it is the case in almost all the OSCE participating states. They are usually sentenced to terms of 12 to 24 months. Upon release, the same men have at times been prosecuted as repeat offenders and then placed in a strict regime prison. While several objectors were released in the first semester of this year, others were arrested. Pavel Paimov, Surab Ramanberdiev, and Admirlan Tolkashev are in the general regime section of the camp, while Matkarim Aminov and Dovran Matyakubov are in the strict regime section. On the 7th of July of this year, Merdan Amanov was given a one-year prison sentence. Other prisoners of conscience, punished for merely exercising their right to religious freedom, are Bibi Ramanova, a mother of a 4-year-old son, was sentenced under fabricated charges of assaulting a policeman and hooliganism on the 18th of August to 4 years in a general regime colony, a prison for criminals. On appeal, a suspended sentence was issued, but the charges were maintained. Baram Shamuradov sentenced on the 2nd of July to a 4-year prison sentence on the fabricated charge of distributing pornography. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Now this is the floor for Forum 18 News Service, followed by Norwegian Helsinki Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My full statement will be on the website. The newly published OSCE Venice Commission Joint Guidelines on the Legal Personality of Original Belief Communities state, and I quote, "State permission may not be made a condition for the exercise of the freedom of religion or belief," or as UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Heiner Bielefeld, told us in 2012, it is a, quotes, non-negotiable right of all human beings that the state has to respect. This right engages a variety of restrictions and violence used against people simply seeking to exercise their fundamental rights. So what can be done to challenge state permission? General recommendations for participating states, OSCE institutions and field operations could be insisting that human dimension commitments are implemented in full by all participating states, situating OSCE religious tolerance and non-discrimination work within a human rights for all perspective, prioritizing respect for the freedoms of religion or belief, and also for their linked fundamental freedoms and rights, such as the freedoms of expression, assembly, and the right to be free from torture. Mainstreaming work to ensure and promote freedom of religion or belief with the interlinked human rights. For example, within the ODIHR Human Rights Department, now that ODIHR has taken the excellent move to move freedom of religion or belief considerations within that department. And finally, to use tools such as the EU guidelines on the promotion and protection of freedom of religion or belief with other tools such as the joint guidelines on the legal personality of religion or belief communities and the similarly newly published OSCE guidelines on the protection of human rights defenders. There are also specific recommendations for particular participating states in relation to Turkey, as my colleague from Christian Solidarity Worldwide will say, and in relation to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, as my colleague from Norwegian Helsinki Committee will say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So Norwegian Helsinki Committee, followed by Christian Solidarity Worldwide.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Today, the Forum 18 News Service, in cooperation with the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, launches a new report on freedom of religion or belief in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, updating our report from 2010. For research, we have visited Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan on several occasions over the last years and met with authorities, religious communities, civil society activists, and academics. We respect that some of the interviewees prefer to stay anonymous, although this might make the impression they have no recommendations to give to the authorities. In fact, religious groups in these countries face several challenges and have a number of relevant recommendations, but fear for their safety. Thankfully, local and international human rights organizations include freedom of religion or belief issues in their work and make the recommendations known after all. We urge the authorities of the two countries to take note of the fact that religious believers fear for their own safety. This is a serious obstacle to development of legislation and policies and shows the true situation for freedom of religion or belief in a country. The authorities should thus carry out the necessary reforms and procedures to get rid of the impunity that obviously prevails for officials on all levels in order to create such a threatening atmosphere for believers. A striking example is the recent visit of the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief to Kazakhstan. The authorities invited the Special Rapporteur in a continuation of their campaign to front interreligious harmony and tolerance in the state. However, a range of religious believers that were invited to speak to the rapporteur refrained for fear of their own safety. This is not tolerance and harmony and not freedom of religion or belief. The Kyrgyz Republic is now in the process of revising its state policy on religion, and we appreciate the beginning efforts, the welcoming attitude in dialogue meetings, and the invitation to provide assistance. However, there is still room for improvement in the procedures and the documents that exist as draft version at present. We therefore urge the Kyrgyz Republic to involve civil society actors and religious believers in a genuine dialogue in the process, ensure that necessary information is available to all participants of the working groups, and that discussion is carried out in both the official and state languages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next is Christian Solidarity Worldwide, followed by Giuseppe Dossetti.
Thank you. Christian Solidarity Worldwide, which advocates for freedom of religion or belief for people of all faiths or none, echoes the 2013 Kiev Ministerial Council decision on the freedom of thought, conscience, religion or belief. This decision calls upon OSCE participating states to refrain from imposing restrictions inconsistent with OSCE commitments and international obligations on the practice of religion or belief by individuals and religious communities. In the case of Turkey, religious minorities, in particular Alevi Muslims, Christians and converts from Sunni Islam to a minority religion, continue to face hostility and discrimination, both from the state and at a societal level. CSW recommends that the Turkish government remove all reservations to international human rights treaties and uphold the rights outlined in the international statutes to which Turkey is party. Ensure that all belief groups and their institutions can obtain legal personality and effectively exercise their internationally established rights. Ensure that the Turkish state, including the Diyanet, act in a non-discriminatory manner in accordance with Turkey's international human rights commitments on freedom of religion or belief. Remove the religion section on identity cards. Enable the establishment of clerical and theological institutions for all religions. Effectively prosecute those who attack places of worship or individuals due to their religion or belief, and provide the victims of rights violations with reparations. Educate all public officials, including those charged with law enforcement, in their duty to protect the rights of religious minorities in a manner consistent with the International Human Rights Framework on freedom of religion or belief. Monitor the implementation of the decree returning confiscated properties to minority communities to ensure that the General Foundations Board of Turkey processes each application for return of assets quickly and fairly. CSW further calls on OSCE participating states and institutions to encourage and assist the Turkish authorities in promoting greater interfaith harmony and understanding in accordance with the accepted international human rights standards on freedom of religion or belief. Our full statement will appear on the website. Thank you.
Thank you. Giuseppe Dossetti, followed by Core Issues Trust.
Спасибо, господин модератор. First of all, let me note that the Ministerial Council Decision 313 represents another OSCE success story in the protection of religious freedom. But despite many commitments, violations of religious communities' rights are a daily reality in the whole OSCE area. Especially east of Vienna, undue restrictions remain against the registration of religious communities. In this regard, the guidelines on the legal personality of religious or belief communities are an excellent tool for drafting and reviewing legislation in a way consistent with the OSCE commitments. Religious properties are illegitimately expropriated or confiscated ones are not returned to the original owner but assigned for different use than original. The autonomy of religious communities is equally violated. They are prevented to freely select, appoint, and replace their leaders due to interference of civil authorities, or are not allowed to hire and retain people in accordance to their view and interests because certain anti-discrimination laws. Individuals are prevented to live and act in accordance with the dictates of their conscience. West of Vienna, it is more and more widespread the tendency to deny the public role of religion, and according to such trend, religiously inspired behaviors should have no room in our societies, such as in case of circumcision, ritual slaughter, or conscientious objection. In the same way, the right of everybody to identify him or herself through religious symbols and attire is not fully guaranteed. The right of parents to ensure the religious and moral education of their children in conformity with their own convictions, it is called into question. Compulsory teachings on ethical or religious subjects promote values that may conflict with moral or religious convictions. States cannot pursue an aim of indoctrination, and children cannot be forced to a teaching that is not consistent with the convictions of their parents. I conclude. Freedom of religion or belief derives from the inherent dignity of human persons and protects their transcendent dimension. Only the full respect of this freedom could guarantee the free and full development of our democratic societies. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much. So now this is the floor for Core Issues Trust, followed by Greece on behalf of the European Union.
Ladies and gentlemen, a submission from Core Issues Trust. The theme is on viewpoint discrimination. In 2012, during the Olympic Games, the UK's primary gay advocacy group Stonewall ran a bus advertisement on 1,000 London double-decker buses reading, "Some people are gay, get over it." The posters were bright red, bold, and intended to encourage acceptance of the view that sexual preference is inborn. Countering this advertisement, Core Issues Trust, which supports freedom of choice and LGBT dignity, but works to support individuals with unwanted sexual feelings, commissioned a similar advert on only 25 buses. It too was bold and bright red. The counter-advert read, "Not gay, ex-gay, post-gay, and proud. Get over it." Mayor Boris Johnson, on the eve of mayoral elections for the City of London, instructed the banning of the Core Issues Trust advert only, and actively promoted Stonewall advertisements during his campaign for mayor. The mayor widely accepted popular opinion in widespread media reports that his own disapproval banned the Core Issues Trust advertisement. He wrote letters to politicians affirming his personal intervention. After a judicial review was refused, there was an appeal case, but in June 2014, Mrs. Justice Lang accepted the mayor's testimony that he did not personally ban the advertisement, arguing that the word instructed in this case does not mean what most Britons believe it to mean. The case continues. Such viewpoint discrimination and the favouring of one side of an argument in the year when the Royal College of Psychiatrists have conceded that homosexuality is not genetic is discrimination of the clearest order and violation of both public office and purse. Thank you.
So now it is the floor for Greece on behalf of the European Union, followed by France.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The following EU statement is also on behalf of Albania, Andorra, Armenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Georgia, Moldova, Montenegro, Norway, San Marino, Serbia, Ukraine. Mr. Moderator, please note that this list of aligned states is not final. The full list of aligned states will be provided on the written version of the statement. Due to time constraints, I will start with the EU's recommendations. The full list of the EU statement, the full text of the EU statement will be circulated shortly. The EU would like to offer the following recommendations. In promoting freedom of religion or belief, the indivisibility, interdependence, and interrelation of human rights and the OSCE human dimension commitments should be kept in mind. The implementation of commitments in this area goes hand in hand with respect for other fundamental freedoms and human rights, especially freedom of expression, and equality and non-discrimination for all without distinction. If one of them is lacking, the other one cannot be fully achieved, and vice versa. Participating states should safeguard the rights of all persons, independent of their religion or belief, or the absence thereof, by following a rights-based approach. This goes beyond promoting tolerance and urges positive measures to create an inclusive, pluralistic society. States should protect all persons, not religions or beliefs in themselves, and also protect the right to express opinions on any or all religions or beliefs. We welcome ODIHR's decision to create 2 posts related to freedom of religion or belief in its human rights departments. Participating states should create an environment that enables citizens and groups to challenge prejudice and discrimination against any persons or communities, whether it be in the minority or the majority, on grounds of their religious or non-religious beliefs. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. France, followed by Russian Federation.
La France souscrit pleinement à la déclaration de l'UE et souhaite ajouter les éléments suivants à titre national. La liberté de conscience est en France un principe constitutionnel majeur, garanti par la loi de 1905, dite de séparation des églises et de l'État, dont l'article 1er énonce « La République assure la liberté de conscience. Elle garantit le libre exercice des cultes sous les seules restrictions édictées ci-après dans l'intérêt de l'ordre public ». La portée de cette loi reste fondamentale. En effet, affirmer la liberté de conscience, c'est reconnaître à chacun la liberté de croire ou de ne pas croire, de pouvoir s'engager ou se désengager, d'appartenir à une communauté ou s'en défaire. La République française, fille de la Révolution de 1789, est fondée sur le postulat de l'autonomie de chaque citoyen. Si l'égalité face à la loi peut être affirmée, si l'ordre politique peut être fondé sur une communauté de droit, c'est bien parce qu'elle reconnaît à chaque citoyen la capacité d'être un sujet de droit à part entière et par là un être singulier, distinct de la famille et de la communauté dont il relève. C'est pourquoi toute situation d'emprise ou de sujétion est en soi une atteinte grave à ce socle fondateur et constitue une véritable rupture avec l'ordre politique républicain. Le principe de liberté de conscience impose une obligation positive à l'État, car si la République se doit d'assurer la liberté de conscience, la neutralité de l'État envers les convictions de chacun ne peut s'interpréter en termes d'indifférence passive. L'État doit au contraire œuvrer à garantir pour chacun les conditions d'une liberté de conscience effective et se doit de combattre ceux qui usent des libertés d'expression, de culte et d'association en mettant à mal le fondement même de ces libertés. Face aux dérives sectaires, le problème politique qui se pose est le suivant. Il appartient à l'État de respecter et de faire respecter la liberté de conscience. L'État s'interdit de s'immiscer dans la sphère des convictions individuelles de chacun, tout en garantissant à l'individu les conditions de son autonomie et en le défendant contre toute forme d'emprise. La résolution de cette tension entre l'expression de la diversité de chacun et le vivre ensemble est la clé d'une société apaisée et tournée vers l'avenir. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. Now the floor for the Russian Federation, followed by the Western Trace Minority University Graduates Association.
Уважаемый господин председатель, дамы и господа, приходится констатировать, что в современном мире, несмотря на декларируемое стремление большинства государств к построению гармоничного общества, наблюдается эскалация конфликтов на идеологической основе, особенно в религиозном измерении. Причины кроются главным образом в отказе от традиционных ценностей под прикрытием абсолютизации свободы выражения мнения и свободы СМИ, а также ограничений религиозных прав и свобод. Те же Соединенные Штаты Америки, читающие нотации мировому сообществу о правилах демократии, не особо стремятся соблюдать их на собственной территории. К примеру, нынешней весной Европейский еврейский конгресс совместно с Тель-Авивским университетом подготовили ежегодный доклад на тему проявления антисемитизма в мире за 2013 год. По их данным, США занимают одно из ведущих мест по числу антисемитских инцидентов. Хуже ситуация только во Франции и Великобритании. В начале 2014 года в 9 американских штатах были предприняты законодательные шаги по ограничению возможностей применения исламского права. На европейском пространстве тоже хватает проблем. Данные за 2013 год свидетельствуют о росте антиисламских провокаций во Французской республике на 11,3% по сравнению с предыдущим годом. По данным журнала «Шпигель», 56 жителей Германии считают мусульманскую религию неспособной встроиться в современную жизнь. Проблемы есть и в Великобритании. В результате безответственных действий Запада на Украине, где при одобрении так называемых развитых демократий фактически развязана гражданская война, регулярными стали попытки захватов и нападения на храмы канонической Украинской Православной Церкви Московского Патриархата. Нападкам и угрозам регулярно подвергаются ее священнослужители на востоке страны. Дело доходит до убийств. Уважаемые коллеги, так называемым западным демократиям пора бы наконец задуматься о сути проводимой им политики. Мы уже не раз убеждались, что, с позволения сказать, образцовые демократические страны берут на вооружение худшие методы диктатур, не прислушиваясь к разумным доводам и не находя поддержку собственных граждан. Благодарю за внимание.
Спасибо большое. So the next speaker will be the Western Trace Minority University Graduates Association, followed by the European Association of Jehovah's Witnesses, UK.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The important problem of the Turkish minority of Western Thrace in terms of religious freedoms is the non-recognition of the elected muftis by our state authorities. The main official and public pretext of Greek authorities for insisting on the appointment of the muftis is that muftis are religious judges, and in Greece all judges are appointed. However, the Islamic law exercised in a traditional and a very limited fashion by the muftis in Western Thrace is not obligatory. Another claim of the Greek authorities regarding the appointment is that the muftis are appointed in all Muslim countries, including Turkey. However, this is a false and misleading analogy. Muslim Turks of Western Thrace consist a minority in Greece, whereas Muslims make up the majority of Turkey's population. If a comparison is to be made, it should be drawn with the Greek Orthodox minority in Turkey, where the Greek Orthodox Patriarch is elected in conformity with the long-lasting traditions. Also, in some countries like Bulgaria, muftis are elected. Mr. Moderator, recalling that being a member of European Union necessitates respect to human and minority rights and fulfillment of international obligations, the Turkish minority of Western Thrace urged Greece to take necessary steps to recognize the popularly elected muftis and abolish the practice of state-appointed officials, imams, that is against the religious autonomy of the Turkish Muslim minority. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So now the floor is for European Association of Jehovah's Witnesses, UK, and followed by Institute of International Research of the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences.
To start on a positive note, for Kazakhstan, since January 1st, there has been no banning of the literature of Jehovah's Witnesses for import, and there is also a slight decrease in the number of arrests. However, the authorities continue to use the 2011 law on religion to restrict the religious freedom of Jehovah's Witnesses. On 31st January 2014, 5 special rapporteurs and the independent expert on minority issues of the UN Human Rights Council sent a joint letter to Kazakhstan asking first to stop the arrests of Jehovah's Witnesses for speaking to others about their belief, to stop police raids on their meetings, and to stop banning the importation of the literature. Although there has been some minor improvement, this communication has not yet been implemented. More than 50 Jehovah's Witnesses have been arrested and fined 750 euros for simply speaking about their beliefs, which the government labels as illegal missionary activity. 3 foreign citizens have been deported for this kind of missionary activity, including Mr. Yuri Toporov, a Russian human rights defender. Mr. Toporov had no choice but to leave Kazakhstan in May to avoid imprisonment pending his deportation. More information in our written statement. Jehovah's Witnesses respectfully request that Kazakhstan stop harassing them for speaking to others about their religious beliefs and ask them to fulfill their obligation on the international level to guarantee all the fundamental freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now the floor is for European Association of Institute for International Research of the Ukrainian Academy of Science, followed by International Religion Movement. Raelian Movement.
Yeah, may I have the floor? Yes, thank you, Chair. On the backdrop of so-called hybrid war waged in Ukraine by the Russian Federation, albeit without formal recognition as a state of war, all distinction between international humanitarian law and human rights are compromised. Hybrid war is indiscriminate and negatively impacts on all confessions without exception. Intentional destructions of places of worship and religious objects have adverse consequences for human dignity and human rights. Fulfillment in a good faith of all obligations under international law, especially those focused on protection of cultural property, including places of worship and other religious objects, are among the basic principles stipulated in the Helsinki Final Act. The Kyiv Ministerial Council Decision 3/13 on freedom of thought, conscious religion or belief calls on participating states to adopt policies to promote respect for and protection of places of worship and religious sites against vandalism and destruction. The Baku 2014 OSCE Parliamentary Assembly resolution on protection of cultural property in the sea area also stresses the fact that intentional destruction of cultural heritage violates the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. Since April 2014, continual updates by the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine include, and the others, repeated cases of damages to churches in the area of application, as well as violence committed towards clergy and lay people. Recently published report of the Crimean Field Mission on Human Rights also highlights evidences of freedom of religion's violation and intolerance on religious grounds executed in the occupied Crimea. Attempts to annihilate Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kyiv Patriarchate as such, violence against clergy people and places of worship, etc. The international non-governmental organizations under the auspices of the International Committee of the Blue Shield, in close cooperation with Ukrainian NGOs, multi-faith religious representatives, representatives of the military and other relevant executives, were the first trying to establish a platform for cultural objects and worship places protection in Ukraine, both on practical and theoretical levels. And full list of recommendations could be found in electronic version. Thank you for your attention.
And now the floor is for International Raelian Movement, followed by the European Federation, Fédération Européenne des Centres de Recherche or de Information. Unfortunately, I'm not the French speaking, sorry.
Hello, my name is Eva Ponti from the International Raelian Movement, a new atheist religion born over 40 years ago, which has members in 90 countries on the 5 continents. We bring a third hypothesis for the origin of life on Earth. I'm here to report that members of the Raelian Movement face chronic hate crimes among the French, Belgium, and Swiss media, courts of law, and in many private spheres where people fight our ideologies with no respect for our human basic rights or secular laws, ignoring that the diversity of thoughts and beliefs are the basis for freedom. Not only members of the Raelian Movement, but also their spouses are intimidated on a regular basis of losing custody of their children and their jobs, some courts having gone so far as to take custody of children of Rylan members for up to 4 years, one case being now present. The list of 172 religious minorities called dangerous sects, which the Rylan movement is listed in, the Mivilude and other anti-cult organizations like the UNADEFI and Kamaïd continue to transmit unfounded rumors on our spiritual leader Ryle and his members, purely based on contempt for the Rylan movement's ideas, which, let me remind you, prones absolute nonviolence, freedom of thought and speech, and absolute responsibility for one's acts, and therefore does not impose any religion on a child who is not of age to choose freely. There is such a lack of information on the Rylan movement and other new and aspiring groups that bring people together for personal and spiritual development that we feel it is our duty to educate people in order that freedom not be a vain word, only applicable to some and not to others. The Rylan movement exists. Its sympathizers persist in gathering at seminars and sharing their inner development, which is a lifelong process, and will continue to do so because spiritual development and religious sentiment are at the core of human existence. To refuse this is as ridiculous as trying to stop a baby from walking and growing. The Rylan movement's requests are listed on the statement you can find online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for the Fédération Européenne, FECRES, followed by SOVA Center. Oops, sorry.
FECRIS. La FECRIS, Fédération européenne des centres de recherche et d'information sur le sectarisme, fédère des associations de défense de victimes de dérives sectaires dans plus de 30 pays. Elle bénéficie du statut participatif au Conseil de l'Europe, du statut consultatif auprès de l'Organisation des États-Unis et des Nations Unies, et représentée à l'Agence des droits fondamentaux de l'Union européenne. Je m'adresse plus particulièrement encore que les années précédentes aux représentants des gouvernements ici présents, en leur disant avec encore plus de force que les années précédentes, on veut vous faire croire que notre institution organise des croisades contre les sectes, qu'elle est liberticide, qu'elle est un danger pour la liberté de conscience, de croyance et de religion. Rien n'est moins vrai. La FECRIS et ses associations membres soutiennent les victimes de dérives sectaires. Ces victimes ne sont pas inventées, elles existent et témoignent de l'enfer vécu dans les mouvements qui les abusent et les tiennent sous une suggestion dont elles mettent des années à se relever. Je suis là aujourd'hui tout particulièrement pour dénoncer l'acharnement de ceux qui nous accusent, nous diffament, piratent nos sites Internet, instrumentalisant la liberté de religion brandie comme un étendard de ralliement. Ne vous y trompez pas, l'instrumentalisation de la religion est une arme d'extrémistes, comme le disait courageusement Dalil Boubaker, président du Conseil français du culte musulman, dans le récent appel de Paris. La FECRIS entend ici, aujourd'hui, dire avec force qu'elle est indignée que la liberté de religion, qu'elle respecte en tant que principe fondamental des droits de l'homme, ait été de même instrumentalisée pour vider de son sens un rapport parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe dont l'unique objectif était celui de protéger les enfants mineurs contre les abus qu'ils subissent de la part de groupes déviants. L'unanimité des pamphlets destinés à dénoncer ce rapport et attaquer ceux qui y ont contribué trahit le dessein de ses auteurs, faire échouer une cause juste en la détournant de son but. Toutefois, ce n'est ni la diffamation, ni l'extrémisme idéologique qui conduiront au respect de l'autre et de la démocratie. Le monde libre, représenté par des institutions comme la vôtre, les a souhaités.
Thank you. So now the floor is for SOVA Center, and followed by Jehovah's Witnesses in Poland.
Mr. Moderator, this concerns religious freedom in Kyrgyzstan. At last year's HDIM conference, we reported that Kyrgyzstan had taken decisive steps to resolve a number of violations of the rights of Jehovah's Witnesses. We are pleased to report that Kyrgyzstan has continued with these positive steps. Over the past year, the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Kyrgyzstan has issued 2 landmark judgments upholding the right of freedom of religion. On November 19, 2013, the Constitutional Chamber declared parts of Kyrgyzstan's law on military service to be unconstitutional. It ruled that conscientious objectors must be provided with alternative civilian service which does not support the military and which is not under military control. On September 4, 2014, the Constitutional Chamber declared parts of Kyrgyzstan's law on freedom of religion to be unconstitutional too. It concluded that religious organizations have the right to freely carry out their activity in any region of Kyrgyzstan specified in their charter. Mr. Moderator, despite the positive steps on March 10, 2013, authorities in the southern city of Osh arrested on false charges two Jehovah's Witnesses, Mrs. Koryakina and Mrs. Sergienko. At trial, it was proven that both women had been targeted by law enforcement officials. We hope that the government of Kyrgyzstan will terminate the criminal persecution of Mrs. Koryakina and Mrs. Sergienko. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I would like to tell that that was the time for SOVA Center, but because of some changes, I'm saying that the previous speaker was the Jehovah's Witnesses in Poland, and now I'm giving the floor for SOVA Center, followed by Azerbaijan Institute for Democracy and Human Rights.
Уважаемый председатель, уважаемые участники конференции, наш центр СОВА ведет мониторинг проблем, связанных со свободой религии и убеждений, и мы не фокусируем внимание на определенных проблемах религиозных меньшинств. Но большинство проблем в этой сфере в нашей стране связано с мусульманами, затрагивает мусульман. Одним из основных источников проблем для свободы совести в России является антиэкстремистское законодательство. Больше всего проблем с ним возникает именно у мусульман, хотя преследованию подвергаются и другие религиозные меньшинства. Речь идет не только об уголовном преследовании, но и массовом и крайне неизбирательном запрете религиозной литературы. В прошлом году были внесены поправки в Уголовный кодекс, криминализующие оскорбление религиозных чувств. И этот правовой инструмент явно не лучший в деле предотвращения возбуждения религиозной ненависти. Не случайно за год с лишним после вступления в силу этого закона он не был применен ни разу. Поэтому не следует менять уголовное право по политическим соображениям. В России с прошлого года обострилась так называемая проблема хиджаба. В Чечне власти заставляют женщин в некоторых случаях носить платок, а в Ставропольском крае рядом девочкам в некоторых школах не разрешают приходить в платке. Запреты любого рода в этой сфере не только покушаются на свободу совести, но и ведут к отчуждению определенных групп мусульман, что в перспективе является уже и проблемой безопасности. Строительство церквей, мечетей и других домов для молитвы часто вызывает недовольство как со стороны оппонентов соответствующих религий, так и просто со стороны местных жителей. Однако, если возникает явная диспропорция между религиями, она воспринимается как дискриминация, даже если такого умысла не было. В Москве, например, несмотря на протесты населения, реализуется план строительства 200 православных церквей, а с мечетями в городе ситуация гораздо хуже, и она пока не улучшается. Такая же ситуация есть и в других городах. Столь явно неравное обращение должно быть прекращено. Наши рекомендации для стран-участников ОБСЕ поданы в письменном виде. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for Azerbaijan Institute for Democracy and Human Rights, followed by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Thank you very much. I would like to make my speech on Russian language. Уважаемые дамы и господа, мы сегодня обсуждаем вопрос фундаментальных прав человека. Я думаю, что свобода совести, религии и убеждений является одним из важнейших условий для процветания и установления мира. Если мы не в состоянии уважать идеи, мировоззрение друг друга, демонстрировать толерантность по отношению к различным мнениям, то не стоит обсуждать демократию и права человека вообще. К сожалению, мы не всегда можем сохранить эти ценности. Например, вы, наверное, помните, как 23 сентября в ходе прения по вопросу о праве свободы собрания я выступал в этом зале, а группа представителей МПО устроились позади меня и в знак протеста повернулась ко мне спиной. На самом деле это стало демонстрацией уважения не только по отношению ко мне и ко всем тут сидящим. Хотя в тот день я говорил о свободе собраний в Армении и заявил, что неприемлемо представление Нагорного Карабаха как независимой страны. Участники акции возразили против этого,
Чуть-чуть
но они это
потише, потому
сделали
что я боюсь, что
некорректно.
переводчики не успевают переводить.
Да, спустя 24 часа после моего выступления была опубликована статья на проправительственном веб-сайте Армении panorama.am, связанная со мной. Посмотрите, меня тут называют армянофобом и пишут, что я враг армянского народа. Как вы думаете, это разве не образец нетерпимости? Разве можно объявить человека врагом из-за вступления в демократическом обществе? Я хотел бы довести статью до сведения представителя Армении, так как он находится здесь. И хочу также заявить, что, думаю, эти акции все и опубликованные статьи организованы именно вами. В конце своего выступления я хочу обратиться и к делегации Азербайджана. Когда я ехал на это совещание, я получил одно известие. Оно меня очень встревожило. Хочу, чтобы о нем слушали здесь сидящие. Знаменитый журналист, посвятивший последние 30 лет своей жизни, публицист, главный редактор самой многотиражной газеты в Азербайджане Yeni Musavat, господин Рауф Арифоглу, столкнулся с опасностью быть арестованным. Известный в Азербайджане бизнесмен Анар Мамедов подал иск против главного редактора с требованием арестовать Рауфа Арифоглу. Арест капитана прессы, который и так провел час своей жизни в заключении, наложение запрета на газету, которой он руководит, никак не станет для Азербайджана поводом для гордости. Я обращаюсь к бизнесмену Анар Мамедову отсюда. Оставьте свои притязания против капитана прессы Рауфа Арифоглу. Поверьте, это не пойдет во благо Азербайджана. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much. Alliance Defending Freedom. The next is coordination des associations et particulier pour liberté. I'm very sorry, probably next language will be French.
Thank you. I'll stick to English. In a 2011 joint opinion, the Venice Commission, on the basis of comments by ODIHR, evaluated draft legislation from Armenia against the following standard, quote, "The draft law expressly guarantees the right to change one's religion, the freedom to manifest religion or belief in public or private, the right to act according to one's religion in daily life, and all of these are fundamental aspects of religion or belief." End quote. Our consciences are inseparable from human existence. They're very much part of what it is to be human. Conscience is often what will drive people to cooperative and mutually beneficial behavior, and it's only sometimes that the dictates of someone's conscience will clash with social or legal norms. However, such is the fundamental importance of conscience that society should seek to accommodate those whose consciences point in a different direction to the prevailing orthodoxy. At times in history, it has been those very people whom we now honour. Or as two judges of the European Court of Human Rights put it, freedom of conscience has in the past all too often been paid for in acts of heroism, whether at the hands of the Spanish Inquisition or of a Nazi firing squad. Recognition of conscience originated with war, and that makes sense. Otherwise, the state can force its citizens to kill other human beings, even though everything within them tells them that that's wrong. But to draw the line at conscientious objection from military service says that states shouldn't force a citizen to take the life of another, but that otherwise the state is the arbiter of morality, the arbiter of religious doctrine, and anyone who deviates from the party line can be coerced out of their job, the right to raise children in accordance with their beliefs, and even their liberty. There must be a better way, and there is. The European Court of Human Rights' recent decision in the case of Awada put an end to a line of cases which held that where an employee could simply resign and find a new job, there was no need to accommodate their belief. In conclusion, acting according to one's religion in daily life is getting harder for Christians within the OSCE region. In order, therefore, to protect this fundamental right of conscience, Alliance Defending Freedom strongly urges participating states to recognize not just the freedom to hold diverse and divergent beliefs, but the freedom to act in accordance with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the floor is for coordination des actions et particulier pour liberté des conseils.
Bonjour et merci. Je parlerai donc en français. Je commencerai par les recommandations de l'association. Je commencerai par les recommandations concernant la France, le respect du droit à la défense et la séparation des pouvoirs dans les affaires concernant les minorités religieuses. En effet, en 2009, la mission interministérielle de lutte contre les dérives sectaires a établi une liste de 600 mouvements, cette liste étant basés sur soit des dénonciations, soit des coupures de presse ou des simples dénonciations de particuliers concernant ces minorités spirituelles. Sauf que dans les affaires, quand il y a des affaires de justice concernant ces minorités spirituelles, la Miviludes fournit des documents à la justice. Sauf que ces minorités spirituelles ne peuvent pas accéder à ces documents. La Miviludes refuse l'accès à ces documents pour ces minorités spirituelles ou ces personnes qui sont dans des affaires judiciaires. Ce qui est déjà le respect du droit à la défense qui est violé. Ils ne peuvent pas se défendre sur les accusations de la Miviludes les concernant. De plus, en septembre 2014, l'École nationale de magistrature, dans son magazine, a publié une interview du président de la Miviludes, lequel dit qu'il y a des demandes officielles faites par les juges ou les procureurs, et qu'il y a aussi des demandes informelles, qu'il y a donc des discussions informelles entre la Miviludes qui est placée sous le Premier ministre et des juges concernant des mouvements ou des personnes qui sont faisant partie de minorités spirituelles, ce qui est une violation de la séparation des pouvoirs et du droit à la défense pour ces personnes et pour ces mouvements. Merci.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for FOREF, Forum for Religious Freedom Europe, followed by UK.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Forum for Religious Freedom, FOREF, is an independent secular civil society formation dedicated to protecting religious freedom within the framework of international human rights law. We appreciate this opportunity to share a selection of our concerns about current threats to religious freedom in the OSCE region. Azerbaijan. FOREF urges the government of Azerbaijan to halt the persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses, whose worship services have been disrupted by police officers and whose members have been fined. Religious texts, including Islamic and Old Testament passages, as well as those of the Jehovah's Witnesses, have been banned. Kazakhstan. We deeply regret that Kazakhstan's religion law is used by the government to censor religious literature. Kazakhstan has recently fined numerous citizens for exercising their freedom of religion and imprisoned others. Kyrgyzstan has refused to register the Ahmadi religious community, with officials threatening to persecute any member of the faith worshipping together. The Russian Federation continues to persecute Jehovah's Witnesses, claiming in some cases their literature is extremist. Russia has been condemned by the European Court of Human Rights for unlawful interference in religious life. In Turkmenistan, authorities have disrupted gatherings of evangelical Christian groups, and officials have claimed that singing religious songs is illegal. Members of the Jehovah's Witnesses have been jailed. Government restrictions on religious practice have become harsher. FOREF is gratified that the United States of America the government has classified Turkmenistan as a country of particular concern. But unfortunately, US sanctions on Turkmenistan have already been waived based on quote-unquote important national interest issues. FOREF thinks bans on manifestations of faith like Muslim headscarves, burqas, and Jewish skullcaps are violations of religious freedoms. Despite the fact that the European Court of Human Rights upheld France's burqa ban, we urge OSCE participating states not to follow suit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So the floor is for UK, followed by Russian Orthodox Church.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We fully subscribe to the statement made by Greece on behalf of the European Union, but would like to add some remarks in our national capacity. Freedom of religion or belief is a priority human rights theme for the British government. We condemn all instances when individuals are persecuted because of their faith or belief, wherever this happens, and whatever the religion or group concerned. Freedom of religion or belief and respect for religious plurality is at the heart of British society. Our country has benefited from it, and we would like to see it universally accepted as a basic human right across the world. We believe that the more tolerant a country is towards those who follow different religions or beliefs, the more stable it is likely to be. Moreover, religious freedom is a valuable indicator of wider democratic principles and is often a litmus test for other fundamental freedoms. freedom of religion or belief is often crucial to peace and security and conflict prevention. Many conflicts have their roots in or exacerbated by religious difference. Against this background, the OSCE's comprehensive concept of security is particularly compelling and relevant when we speak of the need to promote and protect this fundamental freedom. But the primary responsibility for protecting it must always lie with individual states. We call on all participating states to make sure that their legislation guarantees equality for all before the law, and that the law enforcement bodies, schools and religious institutions discriminate against no one on the basis of their religion or belief. We were pleased to join consensus last year on the Kyiv ministerial decision on the freedom of thought, conscience, religion or belief. We particularly appreciated its recognition of the importance of also protecting non-believers or those who follow a humanistic or secular belief from intolerance. Last year also saw the reconfiguration of the ODIHR advisory panel on freedom of religion or belief. We were delighted that an internationally respected UK expert was included as a panel member. The outstanding opening statement this morning by Professor Fontaine was an encouraging start. In concluding, we call on all participating states to stand against intolerance in all its forms and seek a world in which everyone has equal access to rights, justice, education, economic opportunities, regardless of ethnicity, religion or belief. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. The floor is for the Russian Orthodox Church, followed by the Religious Center of Jehovah's Witnesses in Ukraine.
Большое спасибо, господин председательствующий, дорогие друзья. Радует, что на этой площадке все более активно ставятся вопросы, которые практически не ставились 15-20 лет назад. Это необходимость межрелигиозного диалога, исламофобия, христианофобия, критика попыток исключения религии из общественной жизни. К сожалению, во многих странах, включая Россию, агрессивные секуляристы оскверняют почитаемые верующими святыни и символы, открыто призывают исключить религиозную мотивацию общественно значимых поступков и даже отрицают право верующих высказываться по вопросам, волнующим общество. Думаю, что такие действия никак не могут поддерживаться честными и благонамеренными людьми, правительствами тех или иных стран. Ведь речь идет о равенстве мировоззрения, о том, что сторонники любого из них должны на самом деле иметь возможность влиять на общество и менять его. Сегодня важен межрелигиозный диалог, и многие здесь присутствующие им занимаются. Но не менее важен диалог, я бы это особо хотел подчеркнуть именно здесь, не менее важен диалог между верующими и неверующими, сторонниками устройства общества и устройства права на светской основе и сторонниками их устройства на основе религии. Ни первые, ни вторые, ни те, кто хочет строить светское государство, ни те, кто хочет строить религиозное государство, никуда не исчезнут. Убеждения первых и вторых не удастся изменить насилием, обманом или промыванием мозгов. Будет очень печально, если спор этих людей будет решаться силой, что сейчас начинает происходить, в частности, на Ближнем Востоке. Крайне опасно вижу попытку навязать людям секулярные и религиозное устройство помимо их воли. В связи с этим полагаю совершенно оправданной избирательную поддержку в целом ряде стран одной или нескольких проверенных религиозных традиций, а также стремление остановить распространение идеологий религиозных или секулярных, которые чреваты силовым изменением общественного уклада. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо большое за поддержку двух аспектов. Сейчас слово... Извиняюсь. Okay, I will change my language. So now the floor is for the Religious Center of Jehovah's Witnesses in Ukraine, followed by the Russian Association for Religious Freedom.
In Azerbaijan, people of various religious faiths, including Jews, Muslims, and Orthodox Christians, peacefully coexist. Jehovah's Witnesses are also at peace with their neighbors in Azerbaijan. Yet restrictions and abuses of religious freedom in Azerbaijan have caused the witnesses to file 19 applications with the European Court of Human Rights. For example, no provision for alternative civilian service. Young men are harassed and prosecuted for their conscientious objection to military service. For example, Kamran Shekalyev is currently in military detention for more than 9 months. By its refusal to recognize conscientious objection, Azerbaijan has reneged on its commitments in becoming a member state of the Council of Europe. Police raids of religious services. From January through June of 2014, police raided peaceful meetings of Jehovah's Witnesses in Ganya, Lankaran, and Mikashavir. Several witnesses were convicted and fined up to €1,700. Denial of registration. In compliance with the May 2009 amendments to the law on freedom of religious beliefs, the religious community of Jehovah's Witnesses in Baku applied for re-registration prior to the deadline of January 2010. Since then, the re-registration was rejected on technicalities, leaving the community without full legal status. Censorship. Azerbaijan is the only COA member state that has set up a system of compulsory censorship of religious literature. This adversely affects the freedom of worship of Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses respectfully request the government of Azerbaijan to introduce alternative civilian service in harmony with European standards, stop interfering with their worship and manifestation of belief, register them with full legal status, and allow them unhindered use of the religious literature. We are interested in a dialogue with the government to resolve these issues. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. So the floor is for the Russian Association for Religious Freedom, followed by All Russian Public Organization of Assistance to the Protection of Freedom of Conscience.
Спасибо. Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Учредителями и членами Российской ассоциации защиты религиозных свобод являются представители основных конфессий, действующих на территории России, правозащитники и общественные деятели. РАРС – конфессиональная и политически нейтральная организация, все решения которой принимаются на основе консенсуса. Главное, что объединяет членов нашей организации – это сохранение и поддержка традиционных религиозных духовных ценностей и приоритетов. На наш взгляд, в последние годы в Европе происходит целенаправленный демонтаж и отход от основополагающих ценностей, укорененных в религиозных традициях населяющих ее народов. Прежде всего, это касается института семьи, брака, воспитания детей. Мы признаем международные правовые акты, закрепляющие личные права и свободы, включая гендерное и сексуальное самоопределение личности, но категорически не приемлем агрессивную пропаганду и навязывание обществу, нашим детям, гомосексуальных пристрастий, приравнивание гомосексуального сожительства к традиционному семье и браку. Как показывают опросы, не более 5% россиян допускают возможность легализации однополых браков, а 95% считают, что отказ от традиционных ценностей угрожает не только падению морали и нравственности, но и развитию демографического кризиса самого существования европейских народов. Противодействие этим вызовам и отстаивание традиционных нравственных ценностей может стать также объединительной площадкой для консолидации религиозных организаций различной конфессиональной принадлежности, способствовать развитию межрелигиозного и межнационального диалога и согласия. Что касается получения статуса юридического лица религиозными организациями, то в России действует так называемое правило 15 лет, ограничивающее получение этого статуса для новых религиозных движений. Но недавно в Комитете Государственной Думы по делам общественных и религиозных организаций была выработана соответствующая поправка, и предполагается, что в ближайшее время в закон будет внесено изменение, дополнение, отменяющее данное ограничение. Благодарю всех за внимание. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for the All Russian Public Organization of Assistance to the Protection of Freedom of Conscience, followed by the Administrative Center of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, я представляю организацию, которая создана по инициативе религиозных объединений России для защиты их прав и свобод. Сам являюсь представителем протестантской религиозной организации. Существующее законодательство Российской Федерации в сфере свободы совести гарантирует соблюдение прав и свобод верующих россиян. Большинство случаев нарушения религиозной свободы решается при помощи общественных и государственных конфессиональных площадок. На федеральном уровне создан Совет по взаимодействию с религиозными объединениями при президенте Российской Федерации, в который входят представители наиболее значимых для России конфессий. Состав Совета весьма демократичный и представляет всю палитру конфессий в России, включая адвентистов, баптистов и пятидесятников. При правительстве Российской Федерации работает комиссия по вопросам религиозных организаций, председателем которой является вице-премьер российского правительства. В парламенте создан комитет по вопросам общественных объединений и религиозных организаций. Представители религиозных организаций принимают активное участие в заседаниях комитета при рассмотрении законодательных инициатив, затрагивающих интересы религиозных организаций. Большую помощь религиозным организациям оказывает комиссия по межнациональным отношениям Общественной палаты Российской Федерации, в состав которой также входят представители религиозных объединений. В регионах Российской Федерации создаются различные площадки при органах исполнительной власти и региональных общественных палатах. Хотелось бы отметить, что в большинстве случаев нарушений свободы совести представители федеральной и региональной власти оказывают религиозным организациям помощь в устранении данных нарушений. Нарушения свободы совести носят несистемный характер и, как правило, являются следствием некомпетентности в сфере государственных конфессиональных отношений отдельных чиновников на региональном уровне. Предлагаю дать положительную оценку действий Российской Федерации по обеспечению соблюдения основных документов ОБСЕ в сфере свободы совести и поддержать инициативы Российской Федерации в этом направлении. Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for Administrative Center of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia, followed by Nois Liben.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jehovah's Witnesses pattern their worship and beliefs after the early Christians, and their conscience does not permit them to participate in the military service of any nation in which they live. Commendably, Armenia and the Kyrgyz Republic have recently amended their laws to provide an alternative civilian service option for conscientious objectors, joining the majority of member states in recognizing the right of conscientious objection. However, a few OSCE member states did not implement an alternative service arrangement acceptable to Jehovah's Witnesses. Azerbaijan has no provision for alternative civilian service. Turkey refuses to recognize the right of conscientious objection to military service in spite of three European Court judgments against Turkey and views by the UN Human Rights Committee on this issue. Turkmenistan has no provision for alternative civilian service, and as of now 6 are imprisoned in Turkmenistan for this issue. South Korea, an OSCE partner for cooperation in Asia, does not honor its international treaty commitments to recognize conscientious objection to military service, and since 1950, South Korea has sentenced 18,009 Jehovah's Witnesses to a combined total of 34,000 years of imprisonment for refusing to perform military service, and over 600 witnesses are now imprisoned in South Korea. There are 73 witnesses in prison in Eritrea, many of whom are conscientious objectors. In Singapore, 16 witnesses are serving prison terms for 39 months. We respectfully request the governments of Azerbaijan, Turkey, Turkmenistan to recognize the universal right of conscientious objection, and we hope that other OSCE member states will encourage global recognition of this right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Nois Liben, followed by Church of Scientology, Human Rights Office.
Уважаемый модератор, уважаемые дамы и господа, обращаю ваше внимание на то, что закон о религиозной деятельности и религиозных объединениях, принятый в 2011 году, существенно сузил пространство религиозной свободы в Казахстане. Хотелось бы отметить то, что в целом ситуация с правами человека в сфере свободы мысли, совести и религии существенно изменилась после принятия закона, к сожалению, в худшую сторону. Евангельские христиане, живущие в Казахстане, несмотря на закрепленные Конституцией гарантии прав на свободу совести, регулярно подвергаются преследованиям по религиозным убеждениям и страдают от незаконного вмешательства властей в деятельность их религиозных объединений. Несмотря на то, что самим законом установлен приоритет международных договоров перед действующим законом, но на практике в новом законе не имплементированы нормы статьи 18 Международного пакта о гражданских и политических правах, гарантирующие право свободно, а значит без регистрации исповедовать свою религию и убеждения как единолично, так и совместно с другими, или при отсутствии у граждан цели создания юридического лица. Считаем, что суды должны местным исполнительным органам разъяснить действующее законодательство, нормы Международного пакта о гражданских и политических правах, которые имеют прямое действие в Казахстане, но сейчас, к сожалению, свободно толкуются в пользу ограничений и запретов. И если политика властей Казахстана в отношении евангельских церквей не изменится, то это приведет к серьезным последствиям. Уже сейчас мы видим, как рост нетерпимости и ненависти по отношению к христианам в Казахстане приводит к регулярным срывам и полицейским рейдам. Рекомендуется в целях защиты прав граждан и единообразного, то есть равного применения закона и приоритета пакта Верховным судом Республики Казахстана необходимо принять нормативное постановление по вопросам непредвзятого применения закона о религиозной деятельности и религиозных объединениях, а также по вопросам защиты прав и свобод граждан. Полагаем необходимым защиту права на свободу совести и религии взять на особый контроль ОБСЕ в целях обеспечения стабильности и безопасности Казахстана. Спасибо за внимание.
Спасибо большое. Единственное, что прошу русскоговорящих немножко говорить медленнее, потому что я хочу, чтобы к концу мероприятия наши переводчики остались живы. So now the floor is for the Church of Scientology Human Rights Office, and the next will be Holy See.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On April 10, 2014, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe voted down a report by a French MP, Rudy Sals, board member of the French Miviludes, on the protection of minors against the excesses of sects. For years, France has singled out minority religious groups labeled as sects or sectarian movements for official hostility and adverse treatment by the government and other public authorities. The report submitted to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe by Mr. Sall proposed a resolution and a recommendation to adopt the French anti-religious discriminatory policies at the European level in the 47 countries of the Council of Europe. In reaction, more than 80 faith-based or non-faith-based NGOs from all over the world, including Christians, Muslims, Jews, Scientologists, Sikhs, Hindus, and even atheists and humanists, stood up against this bill in contradiction with freedom of religion and belief international standards. Finally, the recommendation to the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe was rejected by the Assembly, and the resolution was fully amended by the Assembly to now request the Member States to implement policies of non-discrimination of traditional and non-traditional religions, new religious movements and sects as provided in the final resolution. This final decision from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe shows that the Council of Europe is democratically opposing discriminatory French policies against religious minority. So we urge the French authorities to draw the necessary conclusion from this outcome. We are open to any discussion on these topics with the French representatives and respectfully ask the ODIHR to engage in discussions with France to put an end to discrimination against religious minorities in that country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for the Holy See, followed by Interfaith Council.
Mr. Moderator, freedom of religion or belief lies at the heart of fundamental human rights. This is a well-established constant in the OSCE documents. Unfortunately, in recent times, there's a constant increase of incidents, discrimination and acts of violence against persons and communities of faith, and desecration of places of worship in the OSCE region. Religions should not be seen just as a set of norms or teachings, but also as live communities based on faith or belief, and their freedom guarantees a contribution of moral values, without which the freedom of everyone is not possible. They are not a foreign body within society, but rather they represent its vital parts. The recognition of the freedom of religious individuals or communities does not reduce freedom of others. On the contrary, this recognition is the cornerstone of dialogue and cooperation and guarantee of all other freedoms, including freedom of expression and peaceful assembly and association. We will not get tired, therefore, of repeating that the full guarantee of religious freedom cannot be limited to the free exercise of worship. Recognition of the freedom of religion, which is the basic guarantee of every other expression of freedom, must be strengthened if we are to create the conditions for peace, development, cooperation, and guarantee human rights for future generations. Finally, let me share with you the words of Pope Francis during his recent trip to Albania. When in the name of an ideology there is an attempt to remove God from society, it ends up adoring idols. And very soon men and women lose their way, their dignity is trampled, and their rights violated. You know well how much pain comes from the denial of freedom of conscience and of religious freedom, and how from such a wound comes a humanity that is impoverished because it lacks hope and ideals to guide it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the Interfaith Council, followed by Citizens Movement, Pax Europe.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To great misfortune, the trend of the previous...
Please change the microphone if...
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To great misfortune, the trend of the previous year related to the increasing number of human rights violation cases has been proceeded in Kyrgyzstan till now. One of the latest evidence pertaining to the violation of the civil rights took place in the capital of Kyrgyzstan on 5th of March 2014, when the group of young people attacked the peaceful meeting of a feministic initiative called SKU, whose aim was to share information about women's rights. Supporting the feministic initiative to be a means of spreading Christian views, the group of young people severely beat one of the leaders of the peaceful gathering. Moreover, the police officers of Leninsky Regional Department of Internal Affairs arrived on the place and arrested the SKU activists till pending investigations. The Kyrgyz authorities appear to be content to allow local imams to control who is buried in state-owned cemeteries, not owned by religious communities. Therefore, it can be considered an intimidation measure not to be buried for those who would decide to convert to other religions. Such fundamental rights as freedom of choice of religion has been presented by authorities as a negative phenomenon that split the Kyrgyz society. In August 2014, State Commission on Religious Affairs has started promoting the amendments to the current law on religion. The main purpose of the amendments is to enhance the state control over registered law-obedient communities and the preventing measures and the prevention of religious extremism and terrorist organization is used as the pretext for restricting legislation pertaining to religious affairs. Unfortunately, the hatred speech of politicians against religious minorities are used to attract electorate, which is a very bad sign that shows raiding xenophobia in Kyrgyz society. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much. And now the floor is for the Citizens Movement Pax Europe, followed by Eleftheros. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, Pax Europa supports the statement made by Christian Solidarity Worldwide. We as Pax Europa are concerned about the widespread support in Islamic communities throughout Europe and elsewhere. Foreign fighters by the thousands have traveled to Syria and Iraq, some of whom returned to our countries with their fanaticism and loyalty to the caliphate, not least their skills in weapons and explosives which could wreak havoc in the OSCE region. Barring these warriors from traveling to war areas of the Islamic State is one option. However, Pax Europa believes it is better to prevent them from returning, especially since they have taken up arms in another entity other than their home country. Freedom of religion should not mean the right to wage war against unbelievers or kuffar. Also worrisome is the number of like-minded individuals who did not leave and the network that must be assumed to exist within the OSCE region. This security risk must be addressed by participating states and the OSCE. Another aspect deserving our attention is the legitimacy of the Islamic State. Denouncing it as, I quote, international strong ignorance syndrome, unquote, is all very well, but it does not address that the Islamic State has nothing to do with Islam. If it can be shown that the Islamic State has nothing to do with Islam, we can look forward to their barbaric acts being denounced as the criminal acts they are from all major Islamic authorities outside the Islamic State in the OSCE region. Pax Europa recommends that OSCE participating states, Turkey in particular, do not only prevent their citizens from traveling to Syria and Iraq, but also make efforts to prevent their return. That OSCE participating states demand from all organizations calling themselves Islamic that they approve neither of the goal nor the methods of Islamic State, and that such violent behavior against Muslims and non-Muslims alike is contrary to Islamic teachings and tradition. And finally, that OSCE participating states recategorize any Islamic organization not willing to do so as political rather than religious, subject to scrutiny by relevant authorities for seeking to undermine democracy and human rights or even prevent Sharia law. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. The floor is for Eleuteros, followed by Order of St. Andrew.
C'est en tant que représentante de l'association Eleuteros pour le droit d'être chrétien que je prends la parole. Selon les rites halal et kasher, l'abattage d'une bête se caractérise par des rituels spécifiques et une taxe religieuse prélevée pour chaque kilo de viande à l'abattoir. Cette taxe se répercute elle-même sur le prix au consommateur. Quoi qu'on pense par ailleurs du mode d'abattage, nous ne sommes pas opposés à ces pratiques tant qu'elles respectent également nos propres convictions. Or, faute de traçabilité et d'information, les personnes qui n'adhèrent ni à ces rites ni aux croyances qui les justifient se voient imposer à leur insu de tels aliments et de telles taxes. Je viens vous dire combien notre liberté de conscience est ainsi bafouée, car faute de cette traçabilité, nous en venons à devoir cautionner contre notre gré des croyances qui ne sont pas les nôtres et surtout à verser des taxes qui viennent financer des intérêts qui nous sont étrangers. Voilà pourquoi nous réclamons le respect et la prise en compte de nos convictions chrétiennes, que ces convictions prennent le pas sur toute motivation commerciale d'entreprise qui, pour des raisons économiques et financières, s'alignent sur les intérêts de communautés religieuses qui ne sont pas les nôtres. Que les pays participants, et notamment la France, rendent obligatoire l'étiquetage des produits issus des abattages rituels et ou de tout autre ingrédient ou préparation incluant un rituel halal ou kasher. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. So now the floor is for the Order of St. Andrew, followed by European Humanist Federation.
Thank you. For the past several years, and again this year, the Order of St. Andrew has described the issues which result in an abridgment of religious freedom afforded the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Turkey. These issues are confiscation of property and the lack of legal standing, the closing of the Halki Seminary, and government interference with the election of a new patriarch. The Order recognizes that the government has begun to address these issues. We will monitor progress closely. Today, I focus briefly on a new subject in hopes that it will not develop into another issue dividing us. Within the last 2 years, 2 historic churches in Turkey, which had been maintained as museums, have now been converted into mosques. In both cases, many Turkish scholars and local citizens voiced opposition to the conversions as being unnecessary. Now there is an even more disturbing development. The Turkish parliament has been asked to turn Hagia Sophia of Istanbul into a mosque. In fact, the government's deputy prime minister was quoted as saying that Hagia Sophia soon would be smiling again as a mosque. The Order does not propose that Hagia Sophia be restored into the Christian church it was for over 12 centuries. Instead, the Order believes Hagia Sophia of Istanbul should remain a museum as it has been since 1935. As the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom reported this past May, opening Hagia Sophia as a mosque will send the message that the government sees the sensitivities of Turkey's religious minority communities, particularly its ancient Christian community, as being of little or no consequence. The Order asks the government of Turkey to issue a clear statement that Hagia Sophia will remain open as a mosque, a living symbol, especially in these trying times, of 2 cultures that can exist in harmony mindful of each other's religious heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the floor is for the European Humanist Federation, followed by the...
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The right to freedom of religion or belief is protected by international law and the commitments that OSCE members have undertaken. Despite this, there are a number of OSCE states who continue to deny their citizens this right. For example, whilst many Central Asian state constitutions protect the right to freedom of religion or belief, laws which tightly regulate how religious organizations may operate or prohibit any participation in unregistered religious activities in practice undermine this freedom. The existence of pernicious anti-blasphemy laws is another violation of the right to freedom of religion, belief, and of expression. These exist in a number of OSCE countries, including Russia, Greece, and Turkey, and work in diametric opposition to the human rights standards expected of OSCE members. Notably, freedom of religion or belief applies to a broad variety of beliefs, not just those of predefined classical religions. However, the right to free thought of those with no religion is, by many, either forgotten or knowingly violated. One well-known case is that of Kazakhstan's Alexander Karlamov, an atheist journalist who was imprisoned for expressing his non-religious beliefs and now faces a possible 7-year sentence. Freedom of religion or belief requires equal and just treatment of all people, irrespective of their beliefs. When states start defining citizens not by their humanity, but narrowly by their membership of a religious group, then discrimination and sectarianism automatically follow. We urge all OSCE members to fully honour their commitments on freedom of religion and belief, ensuring their citizens can practice and express their beliefs freely and without fear of reprisal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your short presentation. So now the floor is for Laïque, Centre d'Action Laïque, and followed by the ICLA, International Civil Liberties Alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aurélie Bielchida from the Centre d'Action Laïque. The Centre d'Action Laïque, CAL, which is a member of the European Humanist Federation, has always been committed to the right to freedom of thought, conscience, religion or belief as a fundamental right of every human being. It includes the right to change or leave one's religion or belief, as well as the right to hold no religion or not to believe. Freedom of religion or belief applies to individuals as right holders, and the CAL firmly condemn any attack against individuals because of their beliefs or non-beliefs. Several aspects of this right need to be outlined. First of all, the right to freedom of thought, conscience, religion or belief is a right granted to people, not to their belief. Some fundamentalist Christian organizations have been mixing criticism against the Catholic Church and attacks against Christians. Non-violent form of contestation, such as caricatures or protests, can in no way be considered as a case of discrimination. It is merely an expression of the most basic freedom of expression and does not deprive holders of this belief of any fundamental right. Also, while the right to hold or indeed not hold a religion or a belief is absolute, the right to manifest one's religion or belief is not. It may be subject to limitation, provided that they are prescribed by law or necessary in a democratic society in the interest of public safety, for the protection of public order, health or moral, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others, as stated in Vienna in 1989 in the OSCE Principles of Questions Relating to Security in Europe. These restrictions on the manifestations of religion are necessary to ensure that the rights of other people aren't put at risk. One case of discrimination reported by fundamentalist organization was the obligation of registrars to conduct same-sex marriage. It seemed peculiar and dangerous to consider that obeying the law, which is the same for all, would be considered a case of discrimination, or that your personal belief could put you above the law. This is why the CAL would like to stress again that even though the freedom of thought, conscience, religion or belief is a necessity, it has to be limited when infringing on the liberties and rights of others. A religion or a belief should never be used as a way or an excuse to discriminate others or not to follow the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The floor is for the International Civil Liberties Alliance, followed by Kingdom of God.
Merci, Monsieur le Modérateur. Je tiens, en propos préliminaires, à déclarer le soutien de l'International Civil Liberties Alliance aux recommandations de l'ONG Christian Solidarity Worldwide. Promouvoir la charia n'est pas une liberté religieuse, c'est un abus de droit. La charia est une idéologie qui se définit comme un bloc cohérent dont on ne peut rien retrancher. Elle n'est pas constituée d'un ensemble de prescriptions morales que chacun est libre d'adapter selon son interprétation personnelle. La charia comprend 6 points fondamentaux. Le concept de l'Oumma, un ensemble humain regroupant ceux qui œuvrent en vue de l'imposition de la charia et s'efforcent de respecter les règles. Le concept d'un État islamique, le califat, comme seul modèle politique et social légitime. Des règles impératives régulant tous les aspects de la vie en société. Des règles discriminatoires à l'encontre des femmes et des non-musulmans. Le concept de violence légitime pour raison de croyance, et enfin le concept de guerre permanente de l'Oumma à l'encontre de tous ceux qui n'obéissent pas à la charia. La charia est une idéologie au même titre que le nazisme ou le communisme, mais elle a la particularité d'être un système à la fois totalitaire et théocratique. Tous les individus ou organisations faisant promotion des règles de la charia ou d'une doctrine incluant celle-ci ont des activités de nature politique. Qualifier un groupement promoteur de charia de culturel ou religieux est trompeur et inexact. Le seul qualificatif pertinent est théocratico-totalitaire. Aucun pays véritablement respectueux des libertés individuelles ne peut tolérer l'activité de tels groupes qui sont une menace grave pour les droits humains et les institutions démocratiques. Recommandation. Que l'OSCE incite les États participants à adopter des législations permettant la requalification en tant que politique et antidémocratique de toute organisation faisant promotion de la charia dans ses activités, et en particulier ayant des activités d'éducation, ce qui est le cas en ce moment dans la zone OSCE. Et enfin, que dans l'élaboration de ces législations, le BIDDH veille au respect d'un cadre respectuant scrupuleusement les libertés de conscience et de culte des autres groupes et individus. Je vous remercie.
So the next speaker is Kingdom of God, followed by Switzerland.
Уважаемые участники конференции, пользуясь возможностью, позвольте выразить свою обеспокоенность действиями казахстанских властей в отношении евангельских христиан Казахстана. К большому сожалению, правоприменительная практика сегодня в Казахстане все еще направлена на грубое нарушение права на свободу совести и религии. Власти Казахстана мотивируют необходимость проведения такой политики в отношении религиозных меньшинств возрастанием в мире религиозного экстремизма, а также обеспокоенностью в связи с ростом нетрадиционных религиозных организаций и различного рода сект. Вместе с тем, подобная правоприменительная практика никаким образом не решает задачу по противодействию религиозному экстремизму. Напротив, создает социальное напряжение в обществе и способствует все большему нарушению прав человека на свободу совести и религии в отношении все большего количества верующих. Отдельной проблемой является закон, регулирующий государственно-конфессиональные отношения. Закон, ограничивающий свободу вероисповедания, разрабатывался в закрытом режиме и принимался парламентом в очень сжатые сроки, менее чем за 1 месяц. И, к сожалению, разработчиками был учтен международный опыт не тех демократических государств, в которых государство не вмешивается в дела религии, а тех, в которых религия возведена в ранг господствующей и превалирующей, а также опыта стран с диктаторскими или закрытыми режимами, в которых свобода совести жестко регламентирована и ограничена, а верующие часто подвергаются преследованиям. Все это, на наш взгляд, не только провоцирует нагнетание обстановки напряженности в обществе, но и в дальнейшем может привести к еще большей политической нестабильности в регионе и благоприятному продвижению экстремизма. В связи с вышеизложенным рекомендуем участникам конференции обратить надлежащее внимание на нарушение прав человека на свободу вероисповедания в Казахстане и убедительно просим ОБСЕ отнестись более серьезно к фактам по несоблюдению взятых Казахстаном обязательств в области реализации прав человека, в том числе права на свободу совести. Спасибо.
Thank you for promotion of diversity. So the floor is for Switzerland, followed by Foundation Citizen Go.
Mr. Moderator, as a strong defender of dialogue and cooperation, Switzerland calls on all participating states to promote the peaceful coexistence of different cultures, religions, and faiths. In this context, Switzerland condemns in the strongest possible terms all forms of incitement to religious hatred. Hatred begets hatred, and violence begets violence, which is why only dialogue can be the solution. After a popular initiative to ban the building of minarets was approved in my country, the Swiss administration and representatives of the Muslim community initiated a sustained and inclusive dialogue. With the aim of contributing to the empowerment of Swiss Muslims, the Federal Commission Against Racism sought the assistance of ODIHR. Jointly, we invited all Muslim community representatives to discuss the foundation of a Muslim umbrella organization and to assess the community's specific needs in the aftermath of this decision. Switzerland has repeatedly called on all participating states to fully implement OSCE commitments, including those on the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. Civil society, interreligious councils, and religious leaders contribute actively to this end. Promoting and deepening the dialogue with civil society is our priority as the OSCE chairmanship this year. In this spirit, Switzerland engaged this year with the European Council of Religious Leaders and is a firm supporter of ODIHR's advisory panel of experts on freedom of religion or belief. Switzerland calls on all participating states, as well as all religious and civil society leaders alike, to speak out to prevent sectarian violence and to promote tolerance and mutual respect. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much for your statement. So now the floor is for Foundation Citizen Go, followed by Canada.
Dear governmental representatives and all delegates, my name is Magdalena Korzekwa and I represent Atheoi.org and Citizen Go, which are worldwide platforms with 2 million members around the world that defends the universal value of life, family and freedom. Freedom of conscience seems to be one of the most threatened values today, and it needs being protected. There is a need for a strategy to achieve the implementation of fundamental rights in the time of increased discrimination against Christian and also pro-life movements. I want you to consider now a first instance. An example. A Polish nurse was penalized by the director of her hospital because she refused to participate in an abortion. Another issue was that an outstanding professor of medicine, Bogdan Hazan, was fired from the position of director of the hospital in Warsaw simply because he refused to practice an abortion and help finding a replacement. He did not break the law. Yet another one, in several countries in the OSCE region, student of medicine who is against abortion and refused to participate cannot become a gynecologist. These examples show us that an unlimited freedom regarding, for example, abortion may be against not only the right of life, to life of every child, but also against the freedom of conscience, which is recognized as a very fundamental right in the international law. And short recommendations. We should defend the freedom of conscience and promote the respect for this fundamental right, which cannot coexist with radical atheism and aggressive feminism. Then we need to be critical of legal documents and the rulings of the courts, which include in their justification unlimited abortion without considering that they violate fundamental rights such as the freedom of conscience of all legal staff. Thank you.
So now the floor is for Canada, followed by Association of Religious Organizations in Kazakhstan.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. À la réunion de l'année dernière, l'ambassadeur du Canada pour la liberté de religion, le professeur Andrew Bennett, a fait savoir que le Canada était vivement préoccupé par les violations actuelles à l'encontre des communautés religieuses dans la région de l'OSCE. Ces préoccupations portaient non seulement sur l'hostilité grandissante de la société envers ces communautés dans différentes régions du monde, mais aussi sur les restrictions de plus en plus strictes imposées par les pouvoirs publics à ceux qui souhaitent pratiquer librement leur foi ou leur croyance, que ce soit à titre individuel ou collectif en tant que membre de communautés religieuses. Sans le droit à la liberté de religion ou de croyance, les gens ne seraient pas libres de choisir leur foi, ni d'en étudier les fondements et de la prêcher, pas plus qu'elles n'auraient la liberté de participer à des œuvres missionnaires ou la liberté de ne pas avoir de convictions religieuses. Le Canada a donc accueilli avec satisfaction l'adoption l'année dernière de la décision du Conseil ministériel sur la liberté de pensée, de conscience, de religion ou de conviction. Conformément à cette décision, nous encourageons les États participants à s'attaquer à des problèmes précis, comme le recours à des lois sur l'enregistrement des organismes religieux pour entraver et réprimer les activités des communautés religieuses. À cela s'ajoute l'adoption de lois sur le blasphème qui criminalisent les critiques à l'égard des convictions, des organisations et des pratiques religieuses ou tout débat sur la religion. Il faut aussi remédier au fait que certaines communautés religieuses ne peuvent pratiquer leur religion en paix sans avoir à craindre la violence ni les persécutions. Le Canada est convaincu, et les études le confirment, que la liberté de religion, le pluralisme, de même que la paix et la sécurité, favorisent le développement d'institutions démocratiques efficaces et la prospérité sur le long terme. Le texte complet et nos recommandations seront disponibles en ligne en anglais et en français. Et permettez-moi de saluer la création l'année dernière de 2 nouveaux postes au BIDDH sur la question de la promotion de la liberté de religion. Et notre pays se réjouit également d'apporter son soutien à des projets du BIDDH par une contribution extra-budgétaire. Merci.
So now I would like to recognize the Association of Religious Organizations in Kazakhstan, followed by the Moscow City Pedagogical University. Thank you.
Благодарю вас, господин модератор. Хочу затронуть одну из проблем, связанных с нарушением 18 статьи Международного пакта о гражданских и политических правах, актуальную для всего Центральноазиатского региона, которая ставит в тупик законопослушных граждан в вопросе реализации своего права на свободу совести и религии. В целом ряде стран Центральной Азии под предлогом противодействия экстремизму и терроризму в местное законодательство были введены нормы, обязывающие граждан для того, чтобы исповедовать религию сообща с другими, создавать юридическое лицо. И в то же время его создание ставится в зависимость от десятков, в некоторых случаях сотен и даже тысяч верующих граждан. И при этом не предоставляется абсолютно никакой альтернативы по реализации этого права без создания юридического лица, что ставит в тупиковые обстоятельства относительно реализации своих законных прав, беспрепятственно исповедовать свою религию единолично или сообща с другими. Положительным примером, мы считаем, в решении данного вопроса является российское законодательство. В нем есть несколько норм, форм существования этого права, осуществления этого права, которое дает благоприятные возможности для реализации гражданами своего права, гражданами Российской Федерации. Наличие в местном законодательстве нормы, позволяющей реализацию своего права на свободу религии без обязательного создания юридического лица, является хорошим примером для всего Центральноазиатского региона, которому, на наш взгляд, необходимо решительно перенимать этот опыт. Хотелось бы напомнить, что, взяв на себя международные правовые обязательства, государство должно неукоснительно соблюдать их и при необходимости неотлагательно проводить имплементацию местного законодательства в случае наличия противоречий международному праву. Рекомендации. Считаем, что необходимо запланировать проведение в рамках ОБСЕ региональных мероприятий, направленных на открытое обсуждение имеющихся проблем в регионе, связанных со свободой совести и религии, и построение государственных конституциональных отношений. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for the Moscow City Pedagogical University, followed by International Partnership for Human Rights. And we have 1 more hour and 15 speakers. And after that we will have some time for the right to reply.
Добрый день. Я являюсь независимым экспертом по проблемам ислама Российской Федерации. Мне бы хотелось затронуть проблему соблюдения свободы вероисповедания мусульман в России. Как уже вчера мною отмечалось, 14 миллионов мусульман, постоянно проживающих на территории России, являются полноценными гражданами страны и обладают в том числе правом на основные свободы. Но в нынешней ситуации голос конструктивно настроенных российских мусульман зачастую перечеркивается выступлениями людей, причисляющих себя к исламу и не имеющих ничего общего с ним. Государство пытается сдержать эти попытки, но это сдерживание зачастую выдается за преследование на религиозной почве. Подобные комментарии мы могли услышать на вчерашней сессии. Мы, к сожалению, имеем печальную статистику. Если сравнить количество лидеров традиционного ислама, пострадавших в России в результате акций экстремистов в 2013-2014 годах, то их число в 3 раза превышает количество тех псевдомусульманских деятелей, которые были осуждены российским правосудием по статьям экстремистской пропаганды или экстремистская деятельность. Главная совместная задача государства и общества, и она тоже неоднократно озвучивалась, что нужно обязательно разъяснять эту разницу между исламом, религией и миром, и исламом как орудием в руках экстремистов. И в России есть позитивный опыт подобной работы. В частности, в систему образования были введены ознакомительные курсы, разработанные совместно с светскими и религиозными организациями, по основам мировых религий или светской этики. Я подчеркну, что выбор этих курсов, он сугубо доброволен, и курсы носят ознакомительный характер. Это не агитация и не пропаганда вероучения, это важно. Рекомендации о российском опыте в области соблюдения прав мусульман будут размещены мною в надлежащем порядке. Позвольте последний комментарий относительно мусульман в Москве. В соблюдении прав мусульман в Москве. В Москве 4 мечети и площадки есть для проведения крупных праздников. Это крупные спортивные сооружения. И сейчас ведутся разговоры, ведется обсуждение строительства исламского культурного центра. И самое главное, что есть понимание важности этой проблемы и важности решения этой проблемы у власти и у общественных организаций. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much. So now the floor is for the International Partnership for Human Rights, followed by the Observatory on Intolerance and Anti-Discrimination Against Citizens in Europe. Christians.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make a statement on behalf of International Partnership for Human Rights on the subject of freedom of religion in the Crimean Peninsula. In our written statement devoted to the warring trends in Crimea, we address increased challenges faced by non-Russian Orthodox believers. Shortly after the Russian-orchestrated referendum on Crimea recession from Ukraine, members of Crimean Muslim community were fleeing the region, citing the threat of persecution by the Russian government as a major reason for their displacement. According to a report compiled by the Civic Solidarity Platform, the region's Muslim population was being subjected to the precepts of the Russian anti-extremist legislation as early as April of this year. I have personally interviewed dozens of displaced persons from Crimea who alleged that members of the Russia's Federal Security Service, FSB, were regularly visiting mosques and questioning those who came to attend the service. A practice perceived as highly intimidating and which in effect constitutes interference with one's right to practice religion free from threat of or harassment. Several raids on madrasas have been documented wherein members of the Russian security apparatus claimed to be searching for literature banned under the anti-extremism law. The Crimean Field Mission on Human Rights documented several other instances of violence, including an incident wherein a church of Kiev Patriarchate of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was raided by a mob on a military base in Perevalnoe. Using this occasion, we would like to call upon the Russian authorities that are in effective control of the Crimean Peninsula to refrain from exploiting security concerns to enact and enforce prohibitive antagonistic legislation such as the anti-extremism law, which is inconsistent with international human rights obligations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Observatory on Intolerance and Discrimination Against Christians in Europe, followed by Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, the Observatory on Discrimination Against Christians in Europe has documented over 1,400 cases of discrimination in the past 7 years, which is a growing tendency, I'm sorry to say. Here I focus on freedom of conscience. It is a moral obligation for everyone to act according to his or her conscience. History has also taught us this bitter lesson. Conscientious objection is therefore not a privilege. The legal system confers on its subjects but a basic human freedom. Conscientious objection is most often tied to the serious question of not participating in the taking of the life of another. Current cases especially affect doctors, nurses, midwives, medical students, and pharmacists. In another area, due to changes in laws, registrars of births, marriages, and deaths discover a conflict of conscience when laws are changed, allowing for marriage of and adoption by homosexual couples. It is necessary that for registrars who entered their profession before such laws were made, as a requirement of tolerance and respect, that the workload can be organized in a manner that troubled staff can remain in the job. The emphasis on tolerance, respect, and accommodation. Another group suffering from limitations of freedom of conscience are private businesses. A major problem is the draft 5th EU Equal Treatment Directive, currently negotiated at the EU level. In conclusion, today we see several attempts to curb freedom of conscience. Combating a worsening of the situation, we would like to introduce 4 recommendations. First, we recommend to participating states to be extremely careful when considering regulating a fundamental right, because regulation means restriction of a fundamental right. Secondly, it is nowhere in international law that human rights can be exercised only individually. On the contrary, with regard to certain human rights, their collective nature is explicitly recognized. We recommend participating states to protect the collective dimension of freedom of religion and conscience, including Christian hospitals and churches, and that referral not be necessary, which is morally comparable to the performing of the procedure oneself. We recommend to ODIHR to look more deeply into the problem of reverse discrimination, and to participating states to not to extend anti-discrimination legislation to private businesses. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for Ukrainian delegation, followed by Azerbaijan.
Уважаемые коллеги, господин модератор, в первую очередь хотел бы ответить российской делегации, что в Украине нет гражданской войны. Есть российская агрессия, выраженная в незаконной оккупации и аннексии Крыма, разжигании войны на востоке Украины. Всплеск нетерпимости в отношении представителей религиозных организаций в Украине связан именно с этим фактом и с поддержкой деятельности пророссийских террористических организаций Донецкой и Луганской народных республик. Положение так называемых конституций этих так называемых республик исключает свободу вероисповедания. В них утверждается, что первоначальной и господствующей является православная вера, исповедуемая Русской Православной Церковью. Представители указанных террористических организаций планомерно реализуют эти положения путем похищения, избиения, пыток и даже убийств священнослужителей и других вероисповеданий, путем нападения на церкви, религиозные организации, что подтверждено международными мониторинговыми миссиями. В то же время, до 2014 года Украина, по заключению религиозных экспертов и результатам мониторингов, была стабильным государством с точки зрения межэтнических и межконфессиональных отношений, где не произошло ни одного серьезного конфликта на религиозной или национальной почве. Согласно законодательству Украины, все религиозные, а также атеистические убеждения равны перед законом. Церковь отделена от государства, а школа от церкви. Государство способствует межконфессиональному диалогу, регулярно проводятся встречи руководства страны с главами церквей. Так, позавчера главы и представители крупнейших церквей Украины вместе с высшим руководством страны почтили память жертв нацизма в Бабьем Яру, возглавив возложение цветов главному памятнику Бабьего Яра президент Украины Петр Порошенко. Упомянутая трагедия Бабьего Яра является скорбным примером того, к чему может привести политика нетерпимости и национальной или религиозной исключительности, реализуемая пророссийскими террористами и их хозяевами. В заключение хотел бы сказать, что в Украине верят, что усилия мирового сообщества в поддержке суверенитета и территориальной целостности Украины, в прекращении действий России по незаконной оккупации Крыма и разжигании войны на востоке Украины помогут не допустить повторения трагических ошибок прошлого. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Now the floor is for Azerbaijan, followed by the Moscow Institute of Open Education and under the government of Moscow.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As it's the first time that I take the floor in this session, I would like to express our gratitude for OSCE chairmanship and ODIHR staff for the smooth organization of this year's HDIM. Representatives of all nationalities and religions live in our country in peace and mutual understanding. The multicultural dialogue in our country can be used as an example of peaceful coexistence between people of different religions and backgrounds. Mr. Moderator, I would like to inform this session that tomorrow the Baku City is hosting the 4th International Humanitarian Forum. As an important component of the cultural diplomacy, hosting various events on the different aspects of realization of freedoms of religion and belief provides the participating countries with much more opportunities to strengthen their efforts to foster religious harmony and tolerance through cultural exchange and dialogue. Taking advantage of its own rich and cultural legacy, Azerbaijan is currently assisting in the cultural and religious diversity all over the world. The work of the non-governmental Heydar Aliyev Foundation should be especially noted in that regard. We condemn all discriminatory, intolerant acts on the grounds of religion and belief, and also in the name of religion which tarnish the image of religions. Followers of religion should not fall prey to disastrous and odious notions such as extremism and radicalism. Religious communities, while enjoying the rights bestowed on them by the national legislation of host countries, should also come up to their respective commitments. However, against the background of successful and constant promotion of intercultural and interreligious dialogue and tolerance, Azerbaijan is still faced by the ongoing armed aggression by the neighboring country, results of which left the religious and cultural monuments in the occupied territories of our country fully destroyed. We would call on OSCE to pay much closer and needed attention to the desecration and destruction of cultural and religious monuments in the occupied territories of the Republic of Azerbaijan. We are fully convinced only through concerted international efforts such shameful acts of violence could be prevented and their results and consequences eliminated. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much. So now the floor is for the Moscow Institute of Open Education under the government of Moscow, followed by Armenia.
Спасибо, уважаемый председатель. Я представляю кафедру международного образования, которая вместе с религиозными организациями нашей страны занимается вопросами преподавания истории и культуры религии мира. Нами подготовлены учебные пособия в тесном взаимодействии с религиозными конфессиями, учебные программы, методические материалы, и они достаточно широко пользуются спросом также и на территории других субъектов Российской Федерации и в ближнем зарубежье. Позвольте мне на основании имеющейся практики, опираясь на имеющиеся инструменты международного права, высказать несколько рекомендаций. Ну, во-первых, мы считаем целесообразным укреплять правовые основы изучения в общеобразовательных школах религиозной культуры своей страны и культуры народов мира, исходить при этом из международных норм права, требующих уважительного отношения к разнообразию культур, как это предусмотрено конвенциями и другими правовыми документами ЮНЕСКО. Маленькая справка. В российском государстве это предусмотрено законом об образовании. И, как уже было сказано, все учебные модули носят культурологический характер и преподаются на добровольной основе по выбору родителей несовершеннолетних. Второе. Мы считаем недопустимым и призываем к тому, чтобы не было в процессе образования таких фактов, которые позволяли бы в процессе преподавания знаний о религии использовать учебный процесс в политической агитации, принуждение обучающихся к принятию религиозных убеждений или отказу от них, для разжигания религиозной розни, пропаганду исключительности и превосходства, в том числе недопустимы факты, когда используются недостоверные сведения о тех или иных религиях. И в порядке справки по Украине только за период до гражданской войны и в ходе гражданской войны зафиксировано более 60 случаев нападения на Украине на храмы и священников Украинской Православной Церкви Московского Патриархата. Спасибо.
Thank you very much for some of positive examples of the and good practices regarding education. So I'd like to invite Armenia and followed by Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We align ourselves with the statement of European Union and would like also to make a statement in our national capacity. Upholding the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and belief, in particular protection of religious groups and minorities, is among priorities of my government. My delegation has on many occasions invited the attention of OSCE to issue of protection of Christian minorities in the immediate OSCE neighborhood, which are facing existential threats. The physical existence of other religious minorities in the Middle East, including the Yazidi minority of Iraq, is also threatened. At the level of Permanent Council, the delegation of Armenia has raised the issue of urgent need for protection of religious minorities in Syria, in the context of Christian community of Kesab, which were subject of cross-border attack initiated by Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorist groups from the territory of one OSCE participating state. Christians in Syria are targeted by religious extremists, their religious sites are desecrated, and priests are getting killed in the most brutal and dreadful manner. Another recent case was the explosion by terrorists of ISIL, the Saint Martyrs Armenian Church in Deir el-Zor, dedicated to memory of Armenian genocide, which housed the remains of its many victims. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has addressed this issue in its Baku Declaration by calling upon OSCE participating states to prevent the use of their territories by terrorist and fundamentalist groups for cross-border attacks against civilian populations, including religious and ethnic minorities in Syria. We regret that simple reminder of this resolution has been met in the HDIM by unreasonable hostile attitude by Turkey, and would like to take this opportunity to reiterate the call of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in our national capacity as well. In this regard, we would like to make following recommendations. First, strengthen the commitments of OSCE participating states to combat violent extremism based on religious grounds against individuals and religious communities. Address the issue of restitution and compensation for the religious property through dialogue and consultation between governmental bodies and religious or belief communities. Adopt measures to promote full respect for and protection of places of worship, religious sites, symbols, and cemeteries. 4. Prevent the use of territory of OSCE participating states by terrorist organizations for cross-border attacks of religious minorities in Syria and Iraq. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the International Association for the Defense of Religious Liberty, followed by Mili Tira. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, very sorry. This is the floor for Uzbekistan, followed by the International Association.
Спасибо, модератор. Уважаемые участники, пользуясь случаем, позвольте поздравить всех мусульман с приближающимся праздником Курбан-Байрамы. Полный текст нашего заявления размещен на сайте совещания, но в этой связи хочу обратить ваше внимание на следующие моменты религиозной ситуации в Узбекистане. Первое. В Узбекистане создана прочная юридическая база для реализации свободы вероисповедания. На основе Конституции и законов о религиозной совести и религиозных организациях каждый гражданин имеет свободно исповедовать или не исповедовать любую религию. Второе. В Узбекистане созданы институциональные основы осуществления религиозной свободы. Так, более 2000 религиозных организаций 16 конфессий осуществляет свою свободу религии. Третье. Создана система религиозного образования. Функционирует более 90 медресе, Ташкентский исламский институт, учебные заведения других конфессий. Четвертое. Государство помогает верующим совершать паломничество как мусульманам, так и немусульманским организациям. Только за годы независимости 88 тысяч мусульман совершили хадж, а 68 тысяч совершили умру, малый хадж. А христиане и иудеи осуществляют паломничество в Грецию, Израиль, Россию и другие страны. Пятое. Издается широкая религиозная литература, периодическое средство массовой информации, журналы и газеты. Узбекистан является третьим государством в мире, который издал Коран на шрифте Брайл для слепых. В заключение хотел призвать всех участников нашего совещания уважать межконфессиональную толерантность. Узбекистан этими гордится. На протяжении многих веков сложилась межконфессиональная толерантность на протяжении многих тысяч лет. Спасибо за внимание.
Большое спасибо. And now the floor is for the International Association for for the defense of religious liberty, followed by Mili Firha.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Livio Olteanu, Secretary General of the International Association for the Defense of Religious Liberty from Switzerland. I would like to stress regarding freedom of conscience and religion, challenges and perspectives. Appeal to release pastor abducted during church service in a separatist-controlled eastern Ukraine. A Seventh-day Adventist pastor is missing after being abducted by gunmen during a communion service in Saturday, a couple of days before, 27th of September 2014, at a church in separatist-controlled eastern Ukraine. Unidentified man carrying machine guns and wearing camouflage burst into the church in the city of Horvlivka and seized Pastor Sergei Litovchenko, the Ukrainian Seventh-day Adventist Union Conference said. The incident occurred in the when the pastor was leading the congregation in a communion service in the small church located in the Ulica Harlovsky Divizii. The Horvlivka gunmen justified their action by saying that this is Orthodox land and there is no place for various sects there. In conference statement said, they interpreted that worship service, they interrupted the certain service, it forced the worshippers to disperse, and they ordered Pastor Sergei Litovchenko to close the church, forced him into a car, he drove away in the unknown direction. Where he is and what happened to him is unknown. John Gratz, director of the Adventist Church of Public Affairs Regional Liberty Department, expressed deep concern over the kidnapping and said it was puzzled over the reason why anyone would target the pastor. According to John Gratz, Seventh-day Adventist Church is officially recognized in Russia, Ukraine, and we expect the members and pastor to be respected in the authority of the territory of Eastern Ukraine. The International Association for the Liberty from Switzerland is deep concerned and is asking the presidency of Organization Security Cooperation in Europe, the government of Ukraine and government of Russia Federation, which has influence there, to release the Seventh-day Adventist pastor. We believe the churches in Ukraine, Orthodox, Seventh-day Adventist, Baptist, Romano-Catholic, Greek Catholic, Pentecostal, no matter the name and the size of them, can live with understanding and respect, working together for liberty and peace. Thank you, Mr. President. The statement you can find online.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Injo Mili Firha, followed by Kyrgyzstan.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, моя фамилия Васви Абдураимов, я представляю общественную организацию Мили Фирка, которая переводится с крымско-татарского языка как «Народная партия». Очень знаменательно, что на этом высоком собрании обсуждаются вопросы межэтнического и межрелигиозного диалога. Поверьте, Российская Федерация имеет тысячелетний опыт такого взаимного позитивного бытования главных мировых религий – православного христианства, ислама, буддизма, иудаизма. И в этом плане мы можем поделиться этим опытом, как надо взаимодействовать и как надо на одной территории сотрудничать во благо мира, безопасности и жизни человека. Такой же богатый опыт взаимного бытования ислама и христианства имеет и наша республика, и наши народы, которые проживают на полуострове Крым. У нас, что касается мифических, так сказать, утверждений, делегации США, Украины, ряда европейских организаций о преследованиях мусульман в Крыму, это абсолютно не соответствует действительности. Я бы рекомендовал им помнить об одном из смертных грехов, о лжи, которую они тут распространяют. Дело в том, что у нас действуют два духовных управления мусульман Крыма, которые объединяют в своих рядах более 400 мусульманских общин, более 300 мечетей у нас имеется. И после того, как Крым на добровольной основе, на основе волеизъявления народа Крыма всех национальностей, в том числе и мусульман Крыма, воссоединился со своей родиной Российской Федерации, у нас не было ни одного случая нападения на мечети или на служителей мечети, о чем тут вот голословно заявляет ряд представителей. Более того, у нас главные христианские праздники и мусульманские праздники на законодательном уровне объявлены праздниками, и мы все вместе празднуем как и православные праздники, так и мусульманские праздники. Вот сейчас 4 октября начинается празднование Курбан-Байрама. Я приглашаю всех сомневающихся о ситуации в Крыму с положением мусульман приехать и вместе с нами отпраздновать этот великий праздник мусульман. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce my partner from Kyrgyzstan, the official who is mainly working with us. And actually I would like to expect some other people to criticize, not Mira. Mira, please.
Спасибо, господин модератор. Учитывая краткость отведенного времени, я позволю себе...
The next speaker will be Soteri International.
Учитывая краткость отведенного времени, позволю себе начать с рекомендаций. Существует очень полезная публикация, рекомендация ОБСЕ по анализу законодательства в области религии. Полезность этой публикации еще раз подтвердилась во время недавнего процесса, который закончился у нас в Кыргызской республике, в процессе разработки концепции государственной политики в религиозной сфере до 2020 года. Это был инклюзивный и очень сложный процесс, очень много дискуссий было по содержанию документа, потому что этот документ – попытка как бы держать одновременно две рамки. Уважение к правам человека, традиционное для Кыргызстана за годы независимости, в том числе религиозные свободы, и в то же время тот контекст, который изменился в нашем регионе, да и во всем мире. Вопросы, которые связаны сейчас с религией, они четко прослеживается их связь с вопросами безопасности и стабильности государств. Поэтому в этих новых условиях моя рекомендация заключается в том, чтобы обновить эту публикацию, потому что изменился мир, изменилась ситуация, изменились обстоятельства, в которых мы все находимся, и удержать рамку прав человека при этом, имея очень сложные вызовы, наверное, очень важная и актуальная задача. В частности, у нас в Кыргызстане было бы интересно посмотреть на обзор, как решаются такие вопросы, как, например, существование молельных комнат в государственных учреждениях, в каких странах это есть и какова практика. Экспертиза, на основе которой реальных живых людей сажают и дают реальные сроки, однако стандарты очень расплывчаты, по-моему, это тоже надо расписывать очень подробно. Вопрос о платках в школах, о регистрации и прочее. То есть пришло время консультативному совету экспертов ОБСЕ по свободе религии и убеждений, может быть, заняться обновлением этого документа. Спасибо за внимание.
For those who are interested in practice in Kyrgyzstan, you can find 3 documents in the database that I decided to upload since I have no right to speech during this moderation session. So the next speaker is Soteria International, followed by Santo HDIM, Denmark.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. Last year, we highlighted the disturbing situation of the Romanian religious refugee, Mr. Bivolaru, whose asylum in Sweden is threatened due to Romanian misuse of the European arrest warrant. The yogi and dissident Mr. Bivolaru received asylum in Sweden in 2007 due to his religious beliefs. Despite the Swedish asylum and engagement from MEPs, experts, and human rights organizations such as Amnesty, Helsinki Committee, and Human Rights Without Frontiers, Romania continued the persecutions. Last summer, Mr. Bivolaru was convicted to 6 years imprisonment in absentia. Being a member of the EU, Romania issued a European arrest warrant to sidestep the Swedish asylum. This absurd situation points to danger at the core of the EU structure, and it triggers discussion at the highest level. In February this year, a new resolution was made by the European Parliament which allows Sweden to refuse the European arrest warrant if found to violate human rights. Commissioners Reding and Barroso both pointed out that it is now up to Sweden to uphold the asylum. In parallel, the European Court of Human Rights recently convicted Romania for the persecutions of yogis. Mr. Bivolaru's student, Dana C., was taken by force, kept against her will at a psychiatric hospital where she was force-fed heavy medicine against schizophrenia. After months of abuse, Danasi managed to escape her captivity. The conviction in the European Court of Human Rights and human rights organizations making her story public highlight the gravity of human rights violations in the Bivolaru case. Moreover, this conviction of Romania in another yoga student case confirms the social dimension of this case, going beyond an individual and affecting the life of thousands. Soteria International recommends that Sweden consider the recent European Court of Human Rights decision and thoroughly investigate the new procedural openings to refuse the European arrest warrant when it violates human rights, as in the Bivolaru case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now the floor is for Santo Daime, Denmark, followed by the Set My People Free.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm here as a Danish shaman, and I would like to raise awareness about the issue of shamanic ritual practice involving sacred sacraments is being criminalized in my home country, Denmark, where I have recently received a sentence of 6 months of jail for importing the ethnobotanic tea ayahuasca, although it is by International Narcotics Control Board considered as not under international control. I implore the Danish government, the European institutions and experts to thoroughly look into the issue at stake. I believe I've been sentenced according to a law that was never meant or intended to hinder people to follow their fundamental religious or health rights, as ayahuasca, used as a sacrament in sacred ceremonies, poses no threat to public safety or health. My form of shamanic practice is near in Europe, and the institutions must secure that it's not criminalized due to ignorance or lack of understanding. Tonight at 6 o'clock, there will be a side event addressing the human rights issue of shamanic practices hosted by Soteria International. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And now the floor is for the Set My People Free. The next speaker will be Muslim Protection Research Center. Problems Research Center.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And Set My People Free is working to abolish apostasy and blasphemy law in Islam because it contradicts with Article 18, which gives freedom of thought and conscience and belief and religion. And this includes the freedom to change belief. And there is about 1.3 billion Muslims. They don't have the freedom to change their religion or belief. And without freedom to change religion, there is no freedom of religion or belief. People face, over 10 countries, they face death sentence. Over 20 countries, it is illegal. And even when it is according to the law possible, people face a lot of harassment and difficulty. You have a map which can show you this. And I think what I am recommending actually, you have a lot of cooperation with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. But the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is not giving freedom of religion. And this is a big problem, freedom especially to leave or exit Islam. We should encourage them to promote freedom of religion. And the basic right of it is the freedom to change belief, which does not exist in many of the members, or most of the members in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And even where there is allowed, there are people who are being killed. I remember 2 Turkish believers and a German were killed in Maltia in Turkey. And until now, the people who committed this murder have not judged. The other thing is I would like protection of converts from Islam in Europe. They face a lot of threats, and many times they go into hiding. And this is not right. Just recently, we have a lady in Sweden which had to go into hiding. So protection and helping them with asylum. The last thing is education of tolerance within the Islamic institutions in Europe, because over 3,000 jihadist fighters have gone now to the Middle East, and this is 10% of the fighters. This is a large percentage. So we have to work that there will be no blackmailing of converts here, and that people will have freedom to leave Islam and join other beliefs.
Thank you very much. And now the next speaker is a Muslim Problems Research Center, followed by Austria.
Добрый день, Рустем Латыпов, Центр исследований проблем мусульман. Я бы хотел затронуть в данном выступлении антиэкстремистское законодательство Российской Федерации в том плане, что оно создает опасность для его существующая правовая неопределенность, создает опасность для реализации политических, религиозных и национальных прав мусульман. Первое, это выражается в том, что неуклонно растут дела по экстремизму, в том числе в отношении мусульман. Если раньше многоликой общины российских мусульман, если раньше это касалось каких-то отдельных групп, как Таблигh, Джамаат, читатели Саида Нурси, Хизбут Тахрир и другие, то сегодня это касается и такой группы, как традиционный ислам. Хотя она сегодня не внесена в список запрещенных, но кто знает, чем закончится эта ситуация. Почему я назвал это группой? Потому что в общемировой практике, в богословских текстах такого термина, как традиционный ислам, не существует. Теперь, почему ситуация перестала быть контролируемой? То есть сегодня уже имамы тоже привлекаются по этому антиэкстремистскому законодательству. За прошедшие 8 месяцев этого года 10 имамов уже привлеклись по антиэкстремистскому законодательству и подверглись административным штрафам до 100 тысяч рублей, по-моему. Самый большой штраф был. Им вменяется то, что они хранили и распространяли книги, которые попали в список запрещенной исламской литературы. Двое из них подверглись уголовному преследованию, и один из них уже получил условный, заменили ему тоже на штраф. То есть это говорит о том, что ситуация уходит из-под контроля, и возможность широко трактовать антиэкстремистское законодательство, которое можно охарактеризовать как имеющее правовую неопределенность, позволяет привлекать всех. И в регионах это происходит повсеместно, как мы видим. Поэтому его необходимо реформировать, и в том числе, видимо, пора прислушаться к мнению Венецианской комиссии, которая характеризует его как закон, имеющий правовую неопределенность, и включить квалифицирующий признак в это законодательство как насилие. Тогда не будет таких преследований за инакомыслие, за дискуссию там свободную и так далее. Вот в том числе я хотел сказать, что привлекли Фаузию Байрамову, да, известную татарскую писательницу, лишь на основе того, что она высказала свою точку зрения по Украине и по положению крымских татар. Сейчас идет судебное расследование. Все, спасибо.
Thank you for your statement, and especially for the reference to the joint documents of the Venice Commission and OSCE ODIHR. I would like to invite Austria. That will be the last speaker in our list, and please welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Austria fully aligns herself with the statement made by Greece on behalf of the European Union and would like to make the following remarks in our national capacity. Austria is concerned about the rise of discrimination and violence based on religion or belief, as well as the increase of religious extremism in various parts of the world. It is the primary responsibility of states to provide freedom of religion or belief and to protect persons belonging to religious minorities, but also to prevent religious extremism and its result. Cooperation with international and regional human rights mechanism is a cornerstone for the effective fulfillment of states' obligations related to freedom of religion and belief. We have welcomed the country visit to Austria of the 3 personal representatives of the OSCE chair in office on tolerance and non-discrimination issues in 2012. I will detail our follow-up in a longer written statement. Furthermore, we substantially enhanced our activities relating to interreligious dialogue, a field where Austria has a rich expertise, both domestically as well as internationally. Our system of officially recognized religious communities in Austria has a long tradition, as I mentioned yesterday. This close cooperation between the government and religious communities has contributed to mutual respect and understanding and counteracted potential prejudices and concern. In this respect, I would like to draw attention to the fact that in February 2013, we hosted the 5th Global Forum of the UN Alliance of Civilizations in Vienna, which inter alia focused on freedom of religion and belief. It is imperative to strengthen our efforts for integration and to promote inclusive societies through comprehensive human rights education and interreligious dialogue. Austria, therefore, would like to offer the following recommendations. Firstly, participating states are encouraged to develop models of intercultural and interreligious dialogue among different religious communities in their countries in order to promote mutual respect and understanding. Secondly, participating states are encouraged to use human rights education and training at all levels to promote freedom of religion and belief, combat discrimination and intolerance, and thus strengthen the belief of existing commitments and obligations on freedom of religion or belief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're in time. And I would like to invite my colleague, Professor Fontaine, to summarize some of the the whole discussion that we heard. And after that, we will have this special section with the right to apply.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just few words and not a summary. Because I've heard this morning many problems occurred both between religion or spiritual groups and from state. I want to insist on the role of a neutral state. Today should not be a tribune to minimize the obligation for religion or spiritual groups and the obligation for states of respecting freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief, and liberties in general. I think an international organization certainly has to consider every point of view, but has not to consider they are all good points of view in regard with the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have the session, right to reply. Because of time limit, we have only 1 minute for any delegation. So the first speaker is Hungary, and the next one is Turkey.
Thank you, moderator. Very quickly, I've just asked for the floor in order to react to one sentence of the statement of the distinguished representative of the United States. The sentence in question was the following, roughly: in Hungary, Parliament has an uncontrolled power to recognize what is a church and what is not. In this respect, let me make two clarifications. First one, and I quote, regardless of whether a religious group is recognized by Parliament as a church, every religious group is entitled to use the word church in its official name. Officials from both recognized and non-recognized churches have the same rights and legal protections. Names, symbols, rites, buildings, and cemeteries are also equally protected. No state office can determine or supervise a group's activities. Its doctrines, internal regulations, and statutes cannot be subject to state review, modification, or enforcement. And the second is that applicable legislation as amended in July 2013 requires a detailed explanation of the reasons the organization was rejected for church status and gives the organization the option of a constitutional court review within 15 days. And the last word, the source of these quotations was the International Religious Freedom Report for 2013 published by the US State Department. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Turkey, followed by Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We've touched upon many of the issues voiced today in our replies in previous sessions, and I'll refrain from repeating them here. Let me only stress that the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul was given museum status in 1934, and this status remains unchanged. The Hagia Sophia in Trabzon was converted into a mosque over 500 years ago after the conquest of the city. It became a museum in 1964. It was not in use as a church even when the population exchange took place. At the moment, it is open for visitors apart from prayer hours. As for the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, it carries out its activities in conformity with its traditions, and the procedures and principles regarding the election of the Patriarch are implemented in line with these traditions. With regard to the reference made by the delegation of Armenia to my country today, I would like to remind my Armenian colleague that our position on this issue was clearly stated last week, and as I recall, the only hostility displayed in that context was in the tone of voice adopted by the Armenian delegate when replying to our statement. Thank you.
Next speaker is Uzbekistan, followed by Tajikistan.
Спасибо. Хотели бы воспользоваться правом на ответ в связи с заявлением делегации Соединенных Штатов в отношении Узбекистана. На наш взгляд, это заявление носит предвзятый и необоснованный характер и не подкреплено никакими фактами. Мы гордимся той межконфессиональной толерантностью, которая существует в Узбекистане. В свою очередь, хотели бы обратить ваше внимание на неоднократно отмеченные правозащитными структурами ООН, в частности Советом ООН по правам человека и договорными органами ООН, на нарушение прав и свобод человека в США, в частности случаи жестокого обращения и дискриминации в отношении иностранцев и мусульман, жесткие методы допросов, а также ущемление прав коренных народов. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tajikistan, followed by Ireland.
Спасибо, господин модератор. Реагируя на выступление представителя США, отмечаем, что в Таджикистане ограничение законом участия несовершеннолетних в религиозных обрядах обусловлено следующими причинами. Во-первых, это связано с тем, что посещая мечеть для молитвы, время которой совпадает со временем уроков в общеобразовательных школах, срывается занятия в этих школах. Во-вторых, дети могут быть вовлечены и использованы разными террористическими и экстремистскими организациями к преступной деятельности. Общеизвестно, что в соответствии с международным правом государства с целью обеспечения безопасности в обществе могут ввести ограничения в национальном законодательстве. Что касается непосещения женщин в мечети, то это фатво, решение Совета улемов негосударственного объединения Духовного управления мусульман Таджикистана, основывавшегося свое решение на передание о словах и действиях пророка Мухаммада, саллаллаху где предусмотрено, что женщинам рекомендовано нежелательность посещения мечети и приоритетность чтения молитвы у себя дома. Спасибо.
Thank you so much. The next speaker is Ireland, followed by France.
I would like to thank the moderator for the floor and Atheist Ireland for raising some important points that are currently under consideration. A constitutional referendum would be required to amend the provision concerning the judicial oath, and this issue has been recently considered by the government. The matter is under consideration. As regards education, there is no obstacle in Ireland to the establishment of secular or non-denominational schools if sought by a sufficiently large number of parents and if the requirements for patronage are fulfilled. As regards employment in religious-run institutions, Ireland's employment equality legislation addresses discrimination on 9 grounds, including religious belief and indeed non-religious belief. The Government is committed to amending Section 37, Part 1 of the relevant Act in order to ensure that its operation leads to a fair and reasonable balance. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is France, followed by USA.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. La loi française ne porte en aucun cas atteinte à la liberté de croyance, de religion et de conviction. Elle ne vise pas les sectes. L'État français n'a jamais publié de liste d'organisations sectaires. Il ne constitue pas de liste ou de registre de ces mouvements. La Mivilude, qui a été citée plusieurs fois ce matin, agit dans le strict respect des valeurs de la République. Elle s'interdit de porter quelque jugement que ce soit sur les croyances. Par contre, ce que la République française condamne, n'accepte et n'acceptera jamais, ce sont des comportements qui visent à abuser des faiblesses et des personnes vulnérables. Ce qu'elle réprime, ce sont les comportements visant à mettre les individus en situation de suggestion psychologique, à altérer leur libre arbitre. Ce que nous faisons, et c'est notre devoir, c'est de protéger la liberté des individus, et en particulier de protéger les enfants de ces intolérables comportements et des dérives sectaires. Merci, Monsieur le modérateur.
The next speaker is USA, followed by UK.
Thank you. By now, it should be clear that anti-Semitism remains a problem throughout the OSCE region, and the United States is no exception. This is precisely why we believe the upcoming Berlin Conference on Anti-Semitism is so important, and why we urge all OSCE participating states to send high-level delegations with the purpose of constructively engaging in an exchange of ideas for combating anti-Semitism in the region. We know the importance of robust debate to condemn anti-Semitism and change minds, a long-term goal to be sure, and call on all participating states to take prompt actions to prevent and prosecute active violence in the short term. Anti-Muslim sentiment also remains an unfortunate reality in many states. The United States government has taken substantial and specific efforts to help prevent acts of discrimination against Muslims. We have actively enforced laws to protect Muslims from discrimination in employment, housing, education, and in building places of worship and religious schools. To provide just two examples, our Department of Justice has opened 14 investigations and brought four lawsuits to protect the right of Muslim communities to build mosques and schools. And the U.S. government has successfully pursued legal action to allow Muslims to wear religious head coverings and participate in the Hajj. We also reiterate our strong support for the Kiev ministerial decision on freedom of religion and belief, and note in particular the importance of the inclusion of the rights of non-believers. Finally, we would like to note that the promotion of so-called traditional values has never been and never will justify abrogating individual rights. When we hear states attempt to justify limitations on freedom on the grounds of traditional values, we should call it out for the cynical and insidious acts that it is. It is through defending the freedom of religion, conscience, and belief, and defending other human rights, that we may best advance the ability of individuals to exercise all of their human rights, including those of individuals who subscribe to so-called traditional values. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next speaker is UK, followed by Greece.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The UK would like to exercise its right to reply in response to issues raised by the Core Issues Trust. The UK Equality Act of 2010 protects individuals' rights, including their religion and sexual orientation, under a single Act of Parliament, and that an independent judiciary is able to make judgments free of political control. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Just a second. So Greece is the next speaker, followed by Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In reply to an NGO statement, I would like to stress that in terms of comparative law in practice, there is not a single method for the selection of muftis. The Greek law ensures the selection of notable, distinguished teachers of Islam who will perform the religious and judicial duties in the best and most responsible way. The so-called elected muftis are not officially recognized. However, the state does not obstruct their religious or other activities, showing maximum tolerance and restraint despite the evident disrespect for the existing legislation and the often non-constructive attitudes. Furthermore, it is obvious that there can be no analogy with the election of the ecumenical patriarch. Finally, our legislation has substantially enhanced the status of religious preachers who are free to choose whether or not to join the applicable legislative scheme and to benefit from it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
The next is Ukraine, followed by Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Ukraine would like to respond to the Russian Federation and the Russia-supported NGOs. First, we would like to reiterate that there is no civil war in Ukraine. There is an open and direct military aggression of the Russian Federation against my country in defiance of international law and OSCE commitments, which already resulted in the illegal occupation and annexation of Crimea and escalation of violence in the east of Ukraine. Second, as witnessed by the international monitoring missions, all human rights violations which occur in Crimea and in the east of Ukraine stem from the Russian aggression. And we regret that the Russian Federation disregards this objective and transparent information. Numerous attacks on churches, mosques, interrogation of pastors and churchmen by FSB, abductions occur in the occupied Crimea. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kiev Patriarchate continued to report of harassment. Just a recent example in the east of Ukraine. On 27 September, Adventist pastor went missing after being abducted by gunmen in the terrorist-controlled area. We would like to reiterate that the full responsibility for these illegal actions bears the Russian Federation as the occupying power of Crimea and the Russia-supported terrorists in the east of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now Switzerland, and the next is Russian Federation.
Merci, Monsieur le Modérateur. La Suisse aimerait utiliser son droit de réponse suite à l'intervention du mouvement international des Raéliens. Dans son intervention, la représentante de ce mouvement affirmait que les médias suisses ont développé une attitude inappropriée vis-à-vis de son mouvement. Nous la remercions pour ses remarques. La Suisse estime le respect de la liberté de religion et de la liberté d'expression comme des droits de l'homme fondamentaux et inséparables. La Suisse n'a évidemment pas de loi imposant aux médias une certaine attitude vis-à-vis des mouvements religieux. Par contre, la Suisse promeut le discours, le dialogue entre les communautés religieuses et la tolérance vis-à-vis celles-ci. En Suisse, tout individu et toute organisation a le droit de se plaindre auprès du Conseil suisse de la presse. Ce conseil est un instrument établi par les médias suisses pour veiller au respect des standards éthiques dans la presse. Nous conseillons donc au mouvement international des Raéliens de prendre contact avec le Conseil suisse de presse. Merci.
So now the floor is for Russian Federation, and the next one will be Azerbaijan.
Спасибо. Хотели бы напомнить украинской делегации, что конфликт на юго-востоке Украины признан Международным комитетом Красного Креста как вооруженный конфликт не международного характера. Призываем украинские власти не перекладывать вину за всплеск ксенофобии и нетерпимости по всей стране, а самим вплотную заняться решением этих острейших проблем. Теперь, что касается Соединенных Штатов. Хотели бы указать нашим американским партнерам, что в Крыму после 23 лет, прошедших с момента распада Советского Союза, наконец-то стала проводиться систематическая работа по обеспечению прав всех групп верующих. Все граждане, находящиеся на территории нашей страны, попадают под действие российского законодательства. И мы не позволим никому расшатать межнациональную и межрелигиозную обстановку в этом регионе. Вновь настоятельно призываем американских коллег действовать сообща в духе подлинного партнерства. Спасибо.
Thank you very much for following the main topic. So Azerbaijan is the next speaker, followed by Sweden.
Sehr geehrter Moderator, in Bezug auf die Bemerkungen einiger NGOs über Jehova-Zeugen in Aserbaidschan, wir möchten Folgendes sagen. Niemand ist wegen der Ausübung des Rechtes auf Religion und Gewissen in Aserbaidschan strafrechtlich verfolgt. Irgendwelche anstehenden Angelegenheiten sollen direkt mit den entsprechenden Behörden in Aserbaidschan besprochen werden. In diesem Fall staatliches Komitee zur Arbeit mit Religiongemeinschaften. Es ist auch wichtig, dass alle Dokumente zur Anmeldung der nationalen Gesetzgebung entsprechen. Ich möchte auch Sie informieren, dass heute die Vertreter dieses staatlichen Komitees sich mit den Repräsentanten von Jehova-Zeugen getroffen und alle Fragen wurden gleichzeitig und gegenseitig besprochen. Vielen Dank für die Aufmerksamkeit.
Okay, Sweden is the next, followed by Romania.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sweden would like to respond to a statement regarding the case of Mr. Bivolaru, a Romanian citizen and refugee with asylum in Sweden. First, I must underline that we cannot comment on an individual case. In Sweden, as in many countries, individual cases are handled in independent courts and by independent agencies. And the government, which I represent here, is explicitly not allowed to intervene in individual cases. Sweden takes all its international...
The interpreters, you missed the channels, please check it out.
Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Sweden takes all its international obligations very seriously, whether as a member of human rights conventions or as a member of the EU. In the EU framework decision, as well as in the Swedish preparatory works regarding the implementation of the decision of the European arrest warrant, it is stated that human rights considerations can be taken into account by Swedish courts and agencies when deciding, for example, on surrender.
Okay, thank you very much. Now the floor is for Romania, followed by Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Romania would like to respond to the remarks made by Soteria International. In Romania, all the religious denominations are respected and their representatives can develop activities facing no restrictions or discrimination. Regarding the case of Gregorian Bivolaru, Romania would like to emphasize that he has been condemned strictly on criminal charges, which is sexual intercourse with an underage person, following a process during which Gregorian Bivolaru had the possibility to defend himself according to the international standards which are implemented in Romania. The condemnation of the European Court of Human Rights has no connection with the freedom of religion and belief. Actually, the MISA organization founded by Gregorian Bivolaru in Romania is still continuing its activities in our state. So Romania strongly rejects any attempts of presenting a criminal case as a proof of discrimination on religious grounds. We reiterate our strong commitment for respecting the freedom of religion and belief and the freedom of conscience. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Denmark, followed by Armenia.
Thank you for the floor. Denmark would like to exercise the right of reply to the Danish NGO concerning shamanism. Thank you for your comment. Denmark cannot go into the specific details of your case, but we have heard what you said. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker will be Armenia.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The fact that Turkish territory is used by fundamentalist terrorist groups who attack religious minorities in Syria and Iraq is a secret only for Turkish delegation. The numerous accounts of governments of regions, Turkish civil society and the media, community and religious leaders